Welcome back to the Ride Boundless podcast. This episode is brought to you by Ride Clean. Ride Clean is an ultra premium polish, sealer, and wash that you can use on your motorcycle and or car. Ride Clean is simple. Shake, spray, and wipe. Made in the USA. Visit rideclean.co and use promo code RBPodcast for 15% off. My guest, you know him from episode 17 when he was expanding awareness and has a new movie out called Chintu Ka Birthday, Nate Scholz. On this episode, we talk exclusively about UFOs and government confirming the existence of UFOs. So get ready for the ride. Here we go. Nate, welcome back, brother.
Thanks, bud.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
I caught up as much as I could last minute on what you told me to watch. And
be honest, how much did you watch?
I watched the whole Bob Lazar,
Okay.
which I thought what Jeremy did with the production was cool, but he kind of stretched out a little over the top. There was a lot of time that could have. There's a lot of scenes that could have been cut.
Got a little too poetic.
Yeah, a little too poetic. Then he had that
Mickey
one.
Rourke. It was the narrator.
And then, I don't know what the fuck was going on. Like every time he spoke, he had to say fuck, and that was kind of funny. And then towards the end, the way he wraps it up, doing all the video and the facts and everything. I mean, like if I would have just watched that, I would have been super happy as well.
For sure.
So, I never got too much into Bob Lazar's story, but it seems, he's been saying the same thing for 30 years. I worked on a spacecraft. It's technology we don't have. It's fucking super impressive. It's untouchable. And he's been working on it. He's never saw aliens, and that's it, and then looking at everything else, he really has been saying the same thing for 30 years. Nothing different, nothing.
Wait, you said that he never saw aliens? He did say.
No, on this.
He did say that he saw a couple of bodies, right?
No. He said that like there was a moment that he thought when he quickly glanced through like a small little window of a door that he saw something. But
long arms. He saw something short with long arms, but then he even corrected it and said it's kind of like it could have been a doll or something like
kid size,
like kid size or something like that. Well, kids is what they supposedly call him based on his experience. You see,
very good, very good.
So I watched a few other things. A few other things, and so that was good. I enjoyed it. I just think Jeremy went a little too deep, too far into the production. It could have been mellower.
I don't disagree. I think one of the biggest issues with most UFO documentaries that are out there is the production value and the format that they use is usually so cheesy that it kind of takes away from the validity of the subject matter that they're discussing in it. Where I think if they were just to do it as a more straightforward approach, like here's the facts, we don't need to sensationalize it with this other shit. But I also know that we're dealing with a generation of stupid people. No offense, but it is like they have to be entertained.
They'll be very offended.
I hope so. They have to be constantly be entertained. Like everything's 3-minute little bites. Like if you don't, you lose their attention. That's why everything on YouTube is as short as it is.
But that's what really threw me off of the whole Jeremy thing is that there was a lot he could have cut out. I mean, there was just there was just dead air for like.
And reiterate. I mean, I don't know. Did you make it to the Stephen Greer stuff?
Is that the encounters of the fifth?
Unacknowledged and close encounters of the fifth kind?
Yeah, the fifth kind. I got 55 minutes into it, and I think I still need another 45.
What about unacknowledged?
I watched the last one, the encounters.
Good.
It is good, but it is a little long.
Yeah, it is. It's like 2 hours. 10
and
minutes.
There's a lot of, like you're saying, reiteration of the same things.
That's the worst part about
the opening on that one was amazing.
Yeah,
the one that I saw, the opening, like straightforward.
Unacknowledged too. He did the same on Unacknowledged and Serious. Like his intros, those movies are phenomenal. But all three of them do reiterate similar things that are in the other one. So you're going to watch. But I think it's also important for him to get across the points he's getting across. Is that you have to be able to re-educate the audience in case that's their first time watching it. Where it's most annoying is in the Unidentified series that I sent you, which is like the 6-part one that Tom DeLong did.
Yeah, I didn't get into that. Not yet.
Yeah, that's basically all about the 3 declassified UFO videos from the DoD, the Gimbal, Go Fast, and Tic Tac. And they stretched this out for 6 fucking episodes. It really only needed to be a 2-hour special.
Yeah.
And they reiterate so much in each
They're
episode.
milking it.
Yeah, but it's to a point that you're like, man, like it's like after each commercial break, it's like they're re-educating the audience in case somebody just tuned in.
Right.
And I'm like, seriously, man, like if they're interested, they'll just rewatch it. Like,
Also, this is not in TV anymore. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, you can edit it down. Like, yeah, for sure. It's, well, I mean, I'm glad you watched something.
Yeah, no, and
there's so much more homework for you to do.
There's I know there's plenty, and like I said, I do know some stuff, and I followed up some previous stuff. I don't know if I told you last time, but my mother's been a super she's read every book, she's followed it, she's gone to places, she loves it, she's fascinated by it. She's even, when she started learning how to make like iMovies bullshit, her little Cuban dance music ones, she would add UFOs at the end of the thing, like.
Really?
Yeah, she's so fascinated. She witnessed it. Supposedly, she witnessed it with my father when I was a little kid. I was like 4 or 5 years old. They saw. I think they were. I don't even know what city they were in at then, but they saw like a light on top of a building, and it was like a really, really strong, bright light. And all of a sudden, they just saw something come out and just leave. And I was like,
was that here in America?
It was here in America.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, it was somewhere in America. It was Florida or California.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for those of you listening,
and she's seen more. I'm just that son, like, oh, Mom, come on. Like, I'm busy. Like, I don't, but if anybody hears her, it's like so detailed. And
once you see it, man, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And it changes your paradigm. It changes your life forever. And there's no going back after that. And that's just the reality of any UFO abductee and any person who's ever truly witnessed and experienced a craft with their own eyes, is that it's a paradigm shifting moment that is a mix of so many emotions at once that it's difficult to describe. I usually tell people it was, for my first encounter at Area 51, it was humbling, terrifying, exciting. You're in awe.
And let's remind everybody about that trip. So you went out there when again?
I think it's about 5 years ago. And before I get too far, and just for everyone who's listening, the videos that I was having Robert watch beforehand, just so you can do your own homework as well, because these are some of the more vetted documentaries that are out there, because there's a lot of bullshit, and I try to save people a lot of the hassle of going through 10 years of research that I've gone through to sift through the nonsense to get to the stuff that has the most substance. So the 3 documentaries that we're talking about with Dr. Stephen Greer is Cirrus, Unacknowledged, and Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. I believe Unacknowledged is on Netflix. The other 2 you're going to have to do VOD right now. Bob Lazar, that documentary is on Netflix as well. Highly recommend that. The Unidentified series, which is what Tom DeLong did, and he's done this with his To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science that he put together, that essentially is made up of a former head of the part of the DoD, which was called ATIP, Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program. He came out and did this with Tom, as well as a former head of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, some heads of the CIA,
which
NSA.
I didn't understand that company, that Skunk Works. Who are they?
So each,
they got brought up a lot in the Bob Lazar.
Oh, for sure.
Video.
Yeah. Well, so each one of the quote unquote, like the military industrial complex companies that we have, if you will, that they make up the military industrial complex, as companies like Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, so on and so forth. And so each of them have a branch of their company that is essentially black budget, off the books. These are the fastest of these organizations are doing work for the military, and most of that work has to do with the reverse engineering of foreign craft on this planet. This is what's been going on since the 40s with Roswell, and so they have been responsible, like in cooperation with our government, forming the military-industrial complex. But more importantly, as Stephen Greer says, the USAPs, Unacknowledged Special Access Programs, and so their job is essentially to reverse engineer anti-gravity propulsion systems, which they have. Reverse
Now.
engineer. Yeah. They've had for
And what was
decades now.
What was the other thing? The 115, the material that
The
they
element.
use.
Element 115, unobtainium.
And they've created that once.
They
said,
synthesized
like in
it once, but it's so difficult. Like it's not an element that's found here on our planet. Which,
But in
once again
2003 or 2013, they documented it at one point.
They synthesized a very, very tiny amount, but what they had to do to go through that, it's just not repeatable.
Right.
It's not repeatable because it's not found on this planet. I believe it comes from Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta Reticuli 2 is where the craft, especially the one from Roswell that crashed here, was from, because they found 3 bodies. One was still alive, and that
was one spaceship.
2.
Two. That was 2
instances. They acknowledged one of them, but there was 2.
Do you know where? Because Bob Lazar speaks of 9. Do you know where they got the other ones from?
Antarctica, Egypt, places like that were actually dug up. They were dug up. Been here for tens of thousands of years. But to finish, the special access programs with like Lockheed. So Lockheed Martin has Skunk Works. That's their black budget program. Boeing has Phantom Works. That's their black budget program. And one of the craziest things that I know Greer mentions, and a lot of people in the UFO community, is Ben Rich. And Ben Rich was the head of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works for decades. And in 1991, I believe... He was the guy
with the mustache, the Air Force guy, right?
No, he's an old mate. I don't think he had a mustache. But in 1991, he was doing a presentation at UCLA. And during that presentation, he said a couple things that have been quoted ever since then. One of them is one of the most pivotal ones, which is at that time in 1991, he said, "We now possess the technology to take ET home." Yeah. And people kind of lost their shit about that, and rightfully so, but they've also possessed that technology for decades before that. He also said, quote, "We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Anything you can imagine, we already know how to do." And that was 1993, apologies, at alumni speech at UCLA. And so this is the former head of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. Yeah. Like, this is the guy in it. Like, we think, our government, is the one developing a lot of these technologies. They aren't. The private sector is responsible for a lot of it, but the government is funding it. So they're intertwined very deeply at that level, but it's all a part of these black budget operations that are off the books.
What do you think he meant by that statement?
That we have interstellar travel. We have the technology to...
No, I understand, but he was saying that, something higher than a god would have to unlock it.
Basically that it's
just that locked down that we'll never have access to it.
Whatever. And that's also the thing, is none of it's going to... you have the ruling elite, which we kind of touched on last time, briefly as it pertained to COVID and, the secret societies that kind of run the world. It kind of breaks down into 2 groups, because you have the secret societies, if you will, the ruling elite in the private sector. And then you have essentially what has been called the group, but also just the compartmentalized black government that exists, the unacknowledged programs that are off the books that the president of the United States doesn't know anything about. There are 2 ruling classes in secret on this planet. One of them is tied to the government, and the other one is not. It is wealth families who also possess very similar technology and are fighting for similar things on this planet, essentially like domination. But it is essentially technology right now that is reserved for the very, 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 very elite. And so there are people on this planet who have left it. We have bases on the moon. We have bases on Mars. Like, we have gone interstellar. This is not people think this is like some far-fetched thing. It's not. We've possessed this technology for a long time. And there have been enough people, more people than I can even begin to explain to you, that have come forward about this, who worked in the military, who worked in these unacknowledged special access programs, who worked, at Area 51, Groom Lake, or Kings Peak, or Dulce, New Mexico, with these infamous things like the Dulce firefight that took place, and the Dulce Mesa, they call it 7-level underground base, but, each level is, the equivalent of like a 2-story house.
Right.
and this massive firefight that went on between us and the Greys underneath, who we've given essentially, equivalent of like embassies on our planet. And, we lost, like, I think it was 68 of our most elite special forces people in this fight, and which caused a rift because we found out that they were breaking a treaty that we essentially had, I believe, set up under Eisenhower in the 50s, called like the Sigma Treaty, in which he basically gave away our population. It was like, you can abduct people, you can run your tests, but you have to bring them back. You can't like kill them. You can't do this. And in exchange for that, you're going to give us technology. And they were like, yeah, sure, whatever. And obviously we know how this story went, with infinite amounts of missing people, especially during that period of time. There's been a number of reports that went down, especially on missing children in the 50s and 60s, like tens of thousands of them. Very, very strange in that period of time, especially given the population size and what it is now compared to what it was then, and various things like that. But I'm kind of digressing down a rabbit hole with specific things there. I want to be able to have
good, brother.
I want to approach this subject in the most methodical kind of way possible, and I want to, I guess, say this in advance, that I am going more or less off the top of my head with 10 years of research. And so I may fudge a date. I may, or, mess up a number or whatever.
So you're human.
I'm human. So if there's something on this that, I mess up by a digit or something like that, don't discredit it. The point of this whole conversation is I'm going to give people the resources to go look at this. I've read from the experts in countless fields on this subject, and I am here to give you a macro view of all of that and try and explain what's happened the past 100 years with the UFO cover-up, try and explain the origin story of our species, why we're here, where we're going, things of that nature. The very nature of the beings that are on this planet, the two schools of thought. You have, people like Tom DeLong and To the Stars that really kind of takes the posture, which our government does, the ones who are now declassifying these videos, that these beings are a threat. They're all a threat. Like, if you listen to the verbiage and the words they use in all of his books and documentaries, which I've read all of them and watched all of them, it is very threat related. Like, they are an unknown threat. They're in our airspace. It's posed as a threat. Like, it's over and over and over. It's very, very specific rhetoric that they're using. But then you have people like Stephen Greer, who's like fucking kumbaya. They're all benevolent and they're all here, and like, we need to like be
He's the guy
peaceful.
that sets up the people outside and meditate and focus, and then they call them. And
the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind protocol, the CE5 protocol. And I don't agree with either of them because we look at the very nature of humanity. Like, there's good and bad people. There's positive and negative forces in the universe. That's keeps it in balance. It's the yin and yang. There's no such thing as like, only good, highly intelligent beings, and there's no such thing as only bad intelligent beings. And so both of them are here, and we know that. And the good and bad are the reasons for a lot of the secrecy that we have. The majority of the secrecy around this subject matter, in my research and the consensus among those who've come out, who were deep inside these black budget programs, who one of them was claimed to be the head of it, is that the secrecy of this doesn't have to do with keeping it from the population. It has to do with keeping it from them, the others, the aliens, because they can't know that we've acquired the technology that we have, because there is something supposedly coming in the 2020s, which is weird that we're in this time right now, and it's weird that the absolute chaos and the shit going on in the world, this energetic shift that you feel going on right now, seems kind of interesting. But I try not to read into things. I try to always keep a healthy level of skepticism, and you have to when investigating this subject matter. But that has supposedly been one of the main reasons for the secrecy, has been we cannot allow a particular race of these beings that, from what I'm gathering, is most likely the ones responsible for creating us in the first place. The gods of all the old texts, of every old religion, every religion references the same exact things. And there's a fantastic book on that, which is one of the ones that Tom co-authored in his Secret Machines trilogy. So Secret Machines has 3 fictional books, 3 non-fictional books, and the fictional books are, in quotes, fictional. Everything that happened in them really did happen, but they're written as a fictional story to entertain as well as disclose.
And to get published, probably.
Yeah. And this is what the military said, like the DOD And the CIA told him, like, this is how we're going to allow you to leak this information, is in a fictional story. But all the events and everything that happened in it is true. And they're not saying that. They're saying that is the fact. But the 3 nonfiction books are called Gods, Man, and War. And the first of which is Gods. And that basically is this insanely academic look at essentially the origin of our species as it pertains to religion on this planet. And everything that we've ever worshipped as gods in the sky, which every religion references the very identical things. And if you really start to study religion, and I was raised very, Judeo-Christian upbringing, so that was, my base for everything growing up. But then when I started branching out and investigating other religions and learning more about all this stuff, you start to see the parallels between them, which is pretty fucking crazy. Especially when it comes to events that happened in our past, from like the Great Flood to the origin
to the Virgin Mary.
Yeah.
I heard a perfect example of the Virgin Mary where it's like, all right, you have 2 choices. The Holy Spirit comes down, says you're going to have God's child. She gets pregnant, then she has the baby, and it's like, hallelujah. Then it's the UFO story, a UFO passes by, a bright light is there. Nobody can see into the light. She's injected, and then 9 months later she has a baby. And, it's always, even with the Egyptians, especially with the Egyptians.
Egyptians are, man.
They're aliens.
They
had helicopter drawings. They had,
I'm
all
not
kinds
sure
of...
if they're aliens.
We're aliens.
Well, we are. Definitely we're a part of that. We're 100% a genetic
100.
hybrid. We are.
We're not from this planet.
No, and that's hence the reason for our longingness of everything outside of this planet.
Right.
Our fascination with the stars, our fascination with God, something bigger than us that we are a part of. And when I say this stuff, I'm not trying to, when I go into the religion stuff, which I'm about to,
anything,
I'm not bashing on anybody's religion or anybody's faith. I 100% believe in what you want to believe in, because at the end of the day, we are all looking for meaning. We're all looking for hope. We're all looking for purpose. And religion is a great thing to give that. And whatever gives you that at the end of the day, 100% I support, more power to you. Providing you don't want to kill me for not believing in whatever, religion or viewpoint that you hold. But we're all looking for the same thing. And there are underlying truths that are apparent in all religions that are echoed, and I 100% believe in to be true. I just have learned that the gods of these religions are not God, in quotes.
Right.
The source that created us, the energy that we're ultimately from in the grand scheme of things in this universe that, is beyond any of our understanding. That God is real, but it's not any God of religion. The gods of most religions are intelligent beings that came here that we did not understand what they were. And so that is the premise of Tom's book in Gods, Man, and War. Is he starts with this argument of the cargo cult. And so during World War II, when we were in the Pacific campaign, we were flying over a number of these islands outside of Japan. And there was a particular island that had inhabitants that had never been touched by the outside world, that were beyond outside of any evolution that had taken place on the mainland, technologically, culturally, anything. They were an untouched primitive race that was there. And during the war, we were flying planes over it. And these planes were dropping cargo on that island where we had like other soldiers. And this tribe watched as these planes flew by, never having seen a plane before, having no base for comparison, not knowing what it is. All they knew is that this thing flew by and it dropped off food. It dropped off things for them.
Yeah.
So they erected statues of airplanes and started worshiping these gods in the sky. And this is essentially everything that has happened in our history. This is how a primitive race that does not understand a technology that is beyond conceivable to them. Everyone talks about give somebody 200 years ago an iPhone 11 and they'll fucking think it's witchcraft. They'll have they wouldn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, but what about now?
What do you mean?
What about now? Like you give that iPhone example. If you give an iPhone to somebody in the 80s and be like, whoa, what the fuck is this, man? Now it just seems like nobody's impressed with anything anymore.
Well, one second. There is a really good analogy.
Hey, Hyman, welcome back.
Hey, what's up? That I usually use with people. And I don't know if you've seen Men in Black 2. I don't think this is an accident at all. And
Men in Black 2 is disclosure.
He leaves his watch in the locker. And when he comes back to pick it up, he is the god of time. because those creatures that live inside of the locker were able to tell what time it was because he forgot his, and he opens again and they're praising to him, and he's like their god of time, and he comes
Same
back.
exact thing.
It is literally that.
Same exact thing. And that is, I mean, but to
my question,
to your question,
yeah,
so
it's like, what about now? Like, nothing that's happening today are people blown away. People are fucking spoiled little brats, you know, like,
They
oh,
are.
MacBook now has touchscreen, so what?
but this technology though is still so primitive.
Oh, I'm sure.
Like what we possess now, not just the ETs that are here, but we possess is a minimum of 100 years beyond this. And this is what people like Ben Rich and higher ups in the CIA have admitted to people in various speeches.
Which is another question that brought my mind. Who decides? Because I was just thinking about that. I go, fuck. We all like I like the opening scene of Transformers. I think it's 1 or 2 where it's like
Moon.
I don't know if it's the moon, but who's the bad guy? You have Optimus Prime and Megatron. They find Megatron in the Arctics. Buried in snow, he crashed and shit, and then they find him, and then they make a military base out of him, and they take his technology, and it's just the same thing. They just made a great Transformers movie out of it. But then I'm thinking, okay, we got technology from the spaceships, we got technology from the crash sites, we got technology from outside. But how the fuck did Steve Jobs get it? Like, who assigned it to Bill Gates, or who assigned it to that was another thing that crossed my mind. Are they connected? Were they chosen ones? Or was that our real own technology that we created?
They're still playing with absolute primitive technology. Our technology has really not advanced for 100 years. We're still
in the last 100 years.
Yeah, but I mean, like
all the technology.
No, it all came basically around like the 60s. Was this when the transistor basically came in? That was the uptick of everything.
Transistors, microwaves, nuclear power.
Yeah, like that whole era. But nothing has really changed since then. All we have done is perfect it more and allow it to do a little bit more things. But we're not working.
We changed a lot.
We somewhat yes,
Wi-Fi,
but if
internet,
but if
computers, translation, cameras,
kind of. But
documentation.
If you think about in the sense though of quantum mechanics. If you think about these anti-gravity propulsion systems, if you think about the reality of technology that to us is witchcraft, because our scientists today won't even acknowledge it as possible because it shits on everything they've said is the foundation of our scientific thought. And these things exist and we witness them and we see them, and there is an embarrassment of proof. And when we get into this later in the podcast, because I'm going to give you example after example after example after example of some of the most credible people in the military, private sector, et cetera, coming forward, and a lot of these mass sightings that are beyond documented for people to look up on their own. This technology exists, and to us, it is the same thing. When I saw my first UFO when I was with my buddy at Area 51, we witnessed this thing for 45 minutes, 20 feet above the ground. Everything changed. It was like looking at witchcraft. It was like looking at magic, because I knew in that moment, and so did he, that I was witnessing something that was light years beyond my comprehension. That should not be able to do what it's doing.
Physically.
Yeah, with the physics of it. That should not be able to, what it's doing is not possible. And yet here it is doing it. And that
what was it doing, just to clarify?
Oh, I mean, it was doing a number of things, but I mean, it started is hovering, like I said, basically between 20 and 100 feet above the ground, completely silently, moving in erratic patterns, a lot of right angle movements that are just...
It had no jets, it had no...
Completely silent, not a sound at all on it, disappearing and then reappearing, like, 10 miles away to the other side of us, like in the distance, and then like...
Do you think that was speed or portals?
Could have been either. I mean, because these things, I mean, we have the Tic Tac video that was just released of the fighter jets chasing this thing. I mean, it went, I think it was 75 miles in 3 seconds. It went to like their, what the hell are they called? Map point.
Yeah, it was called something like that.
Yeah, like where they're
faster than light.
Well, no, it went to like what their stat point is, like basically wherever they were supposed to be, where the fighter jets were going to end up going, which this craft had no idea where they were going because it was engaging them. It came out of the water and they were engaging it from there. Same thing. They clocked it at roughly like 12,000 miles an hour, but they even then they're like, we really have no idea. That's just the fastest we think, we could possibly imagine with no.
We can process.
With no sonic boom. With no instantaneous acceleration. There's these, they do that in the Unidentified show. They talk about the 5 observables that they use when identifying a UFO or a UAP. And instantaneous acceleration is one of them, so is anti-gravity propulsion systems, being able to do right angle turns, things that are not possible within the laws of physics and inertia and propulsion and things like that. But we watched this do those things. And then I said the third time that we saw it, 'cause it kept disappearing and then reappearing. It covered all 4 directions of us while we were there. And then when it appeared the third time, which is to the west of us, it was the closest that it had been the whole time. And it was close enough that its lights that were around it illuminated its shape. And it was 100% a saucer. Everything that you could ever think of in the videos you've seen, the drawings you've seen, the representations on movies.
A saucer, like a round frisbee-looking
shape,
saucer. No, saucer.
Yep. With
So what's the Tic Tac?
The Tic Tac is, it's another one. I mean, so it's essentially. Hey. You working for China, bro?
Yeah, bro.
Is that a plug? It's essentially just an oval shape craft, no wings, no visible sign.
Do you think it's the same? Do you think it's? Now that's the other question. How many different aliens from different places are visiting
9
us?
to 22.
And do the Tic Tacs?
The
Tic Tac.
Yeah. It's just shaped like a Tic Tac.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
No, I get it. Yeah. Good branding, huh?
Yeah, like that.
The Tic Tac. Do you think it's the same as the saucers?
The same beans?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Probably not. Different.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of reports and declassified documents that have come out. And, some of these, it's hard to know the validity of some of them. But the consensus in my research is what a lot of these insiders have said, is that we deal with, I've heard, between 9 and 22 races of alien on this planet currently that we are in contact with, that are allowed to be here, that have essentially, if you will, embassies, which are under mountains, underground, at places like Area 51, at Groom Lake, Dulce, maybe even Mount Adams, Kings Peak, Utah, Wright Patton, all these major military installations. So that we know there's many of them. There's multiple races of
Have you had contact ever directly with an alien, or seen or known anybody that has direct contact?
Yeah, I have one of the buddies who I go to Mount Adams with. I don't know if did you meet Andy? Was he there?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, of course you did. Sorry. I don't know if he's gonna care if I share a story, but he had some very traumatic abduction related things happen to him as a child, and very, very vivid accounts of things. And I've never seen a person who is able to make contact with beings more in my life. Like whenever we go out anywhere with him, ships just show up all the time. Like it doesn't, he'll just be walking around like the neighborhood in the Couve, like, where he lives, like, walking by the high school, like walking his dog, like at night, and they just show up. And he's just like, talks to them, says, "What's up?" They do like formations, take off, disappear.
That's so fucking insane. You saw this again, right, Hyman?
I
know we talked about this, but
Yeah, I met him when I met Nate, and Nate started.
You met his friend, not the aliens.
No. When I met Nate, we started talking about this, and I'm pretty skeptical, and I was like, Nate, I'm not gonna believe it until I see something. So he's like, "Well, I got this trip coming to Montana. It's gonna be great." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll come by." And he's like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, we just met like a week ago." And I was like, "Well, I need to wake you."
Yeah,
and
very important.
And I came to Mount Adams, and
how did he wake you?
Well,
by going there.
Yeah. He took me there. No, we didn't fuck.
Hi, man.
And, maybe a little bit.
Maybe a little bit.
It's good we brought this to the podcast.
We went there, and we went with one of his friends that he does all these trips with Vera, and then there was Andy with his father, right?
Was it down there?
I think
maybe.
so.
Yeah, he might have came on that one. Yeah.
And
yeah, actually was. No, he was. They came. They took their camper. Oh,
yeah, and there was lights everywhere that we could see.
This was the opening, the lights that you saw on Mount Adams.
Well, in Mount Adams, and like flying over us all the time.
And you took
they were not close enough for us to see exactly where they were, but
I know you took pictures. You did videos too, or no?
I didn't do videos. I did long exposure pictures, so you could see the tracing of their weird movements and stuff.
I have a video from there. It was from the time beforehand. It's very compelling.
With all this fucking technology we're talking about, we don't have a good camera that can record at night.
Well, you have to understand, like, so, yes, and I think I said it on the first podcast with you, was that how often are you looking up?
Yeah.
Never. People aren't looking up.
Especially
if
now.
anything down, yeah, they're looking down on their phone all the time. And then you have to realize, okay, so for like the tiny percentage that you're actually looking up at the sky, then you have to think of the probability that at that time they're going to just uncloak and poke around and be like, hey, what's up? Or that you're going to be ablated enough out in nature enough where it's clear enough that you can see something in the first place. But I'm a firm believer, and this is, proven psychologically and scientifically, that, if you believe something, you will see it. It's a paradigm. Like your reality, like you're constantly filtering out information all the time. And so your information, the reality that you live in, is based on conditioning that you received the first 12 years of your life. And it's nearly impossible to break that without very concerted effort. But like everything you believe is a result of how you were raised. And unless you've worked really hard to not believe that, not be like your parents or whatever the case may be.
Right, to break the system.
To break the system. And once you change that, though, once you like shift a thought pattern, I always use the car analogy. Like whenever you're about to buy a new car, I want to get the new, 5 Series, new M5.
Right.
And like you start thinking about it, man, I really want this car. Then suddenly you're driving, you see that fucking car everywhere. It was always there. It was just never a part of your psychology. It was never important enough to be a part of your reality, so it got filtered out. Didn't mean it didn't exist. Didn't mean a bunch of people didn't already have your fucking car. It just meant that you weren't paying attention. It was not a priority for the information that your brain can process. And they say it can process like 2,000 bits of information per second or something like that, and you're taking in 22 billion bits of information per second. So out of that 22 billion bits that makes up reality, you're taking in 2,000, and that is your reality. So once you shift to your reality and you then accept that this is not only a reality, but this is something that we need to contend with and realize is not only a part of our origin story, but a part of our future and a part of, us becoming a part of our cosmic neighborhood, then suddenly it appears and it's everywhere. And once you start looking, once you start digging on this subject, Robert, there is an embarrassment of fucking evidence. It is everywhere, and it is absolutely infuriating because when you see it, you realize, why is nobody talking about this?
Well, that's actually, I was going to say that I think they're talking about it more than ever now. Trump's talking about Space Force. The other guys released and verified what the pilot was saying that he saw.
Yeah.
Flying the spaceship here. Like it's coming out more in the news. Tucker, what's his name? Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, he's been doing something like once every 3 months with UFOs.
Yeah. But
like
it's on every major network.
It's everywhere now. Now it's
story.
like, what's the agenda? Why are they talking about it? Why are they being so open?
And
how do you feel about that? They've been confirming it and talking about it.
Well, there's a lot of theories on. Not a lot. Well, there's always a lot of theories, but there's a few that are the most logical explanations for this, and most of them aren't good. Once again, knowing what we kind of talked about last time, that like essentially 5 families own 98% of all media. They also own the 5 largest banks, which own the 5 largest oil companies, et cetera, who dictate all information that we are receiving. Those same people have vested interest in these special access programs. Have essentially their own, if you will, secret space programs. They harness this technology as well. If they're releasing something to us, if it's on the mainstream media, that is honestly one of the biggest red flags for me, because it's how it's being released. And once again, it is being released in a way that is framing this as a threat. And not that it's not, because I do believe that there is definitely a major threat component to this. And from what I've gathered from people who are way smarter than me and who worked inside these programs for their whole entire life, have said is that, yes, we need to be fearful because we are woefully outmatched technologically. Remind me to get back to that woefully outmatched technologically. So there is a couple of schools of thought. One is that Werner von Braun, who we took in Operation Paperclip, which I think we might have touched on before.
touched a little bit.
Took 1,800 plus of Hitler's top scientists post World War II and put them to
Created
work.
NASA, spaceships, first everything. Yeah.
Everything, and put them to work in
Poison
our
gases.
propaganda machine. Like they basically took over our media because they were experts in propaganda. I mean, they convinced an entire country to burn Jews without even thinking twice about it. Those were just normal people like you and me. Like they didn't just wake up one day and decide that is some insane programming that took place. And those people have been at work in our country, and they have been the ones behind the disinformation campaigns, the counterintelligence and disinformation that's gone on about this subject in particular. They're strategically put in place there. But Wernher von Braun, towards the end of his life, I believe in like the late 80s, told his number one, this lady who came out, she's actually, I believe she spoke in one of Stephen Greer's movies, maybe even two of them, she might have been in there. And he basically told her, he's like, you need to understand what's going to happen and what is happening. He goes, and he basically said something like, first it was the Russians. That was the threat. We always need a threat because the military-industrial complex owns everything. So everything is about the war machine. War makes money. That's why we're constantly at war for no fucking reason. We're making up excuses to invade countries we have no business being in for reasons that do not check out. We are the ones creating people like the Taliban, ISIS. Those are our doing. They didn't just form. We need to destabilize a region before we could go and take it in. And how are you going to do that if a country's doing well? You cause dissent internally, make it start falling apart, then you come in and offer your help. It's the same red flag or false flag operation similar to 9/11, similar to...
All of them.
All of them,
yeah.
Corona, same thing.
Right. The three things they default anytime the economy's unstable is they either print more money, but then you create more debt. The value goes down. That's not a good idea. Yeah. You borrow money, which we've done so many times from China, but then, China ends up owning big percentages of the country, and that's not a good way. Or you create war.
Yeah. War is the biggest. I mean, the Rothschilds in particular have funded both sides of every war for like 400
funding, stocks, human sacrificing. There's a bunch of... it's a big agenda.
So, exactly. And Wernher von Braun said, first it's going to be the Russians. This is during the Cold War. He goes, then it's going to be terrorism. The new war is going to be terrorism. After that, it's going to be radical third world leaders, North Korea, Syria, if you will, Iran. Going to be radical dictatorships that are going to be coming up. That's going to be the new enemy. It's going to go from the Russians battling communism to terrorism to radical extremist leaders. The final phase of this is going to be a war in the sky. It's going to be aliens. And he said this literally like the last 2 years of his life. He kept saying to her, he goes, mark my word, the fourth and final installment of this agenda is going to be a battle against aliens. And he kind of used like in a quote, if you will, that is the next enemy. That is the next thing that is going to fund the military-industrial complex fucking indefinitely. If you think about the amount of resources we're going to pump into that, when people don't even know the technology we already possess, that would make all of the technology we have obsolete in the first place, won't require any of the money, but they're going to take it. They're going to take it from us. They're going to take it from the government. They're going to drain the pockets of the taxpayers to build this space force with primitive fucking technology to battle supposedly an alien threat, which is Stephen Greer speculates is going to be hoaxed by us because we already possess the technology. We have the craft. We're operating most of them, and we possess everything, and we have already done it because there's been people who've worked for these deep black budget programs who've come out and said, yeah, we've abducted people. We've faked alien abductions, and we have done this to sway politics and do these various things. Oh, yeah. Openly
that makes sense.
Yeah. And so some of it is us. And that, once again, goes to show, like I said, it doesn't disprove anything. All it does is validate the fact that they are real because we have their technology and we are basically pretending to be them to invoke fear.
I saw that video. I don't know if it was at the Bob Lazar, but the one where in 1991 there was like a spaceship from a spacecraft or one of the satellites, and they saw a spaceship flying.
And then there changed direction, then a laser shot up?
Yeah, then there was like a bright light from us, and it changed its direction, flew out, and then you could see a laser. Yeah.
It's one of the most insane
and we shot that out supposedly in 1991, 93 or whatever it was.
That video, if those of you who've not watched it, is one of the most crazy things ever. And
Jamie, pulling that up?
Come on, Jamie.
I didn't even want to unmute my microphone.
Your eye roll said it all.
bro.
Your eye roll said it all. Look up I mean, it's a NASA video. I mean, if you just Google spaceship being shot at by laser in stratosphere or something like that, it should pop up. But it's NASA footage from the ISS, and you watch this UFO hovering in the outermost part of like our stratosphere, just cruising, and suddenly this thing takes a fucking immediate direction change.
There's
goes
a bright
back.
light.
Yeah, there's a bright light from the planet, like from down like below, like so out of frame, but like clearly coming from the planet. You see a bright light, and this thing immediately changes directions and bolts the fuck out of there. And then right after, you see this fucking laser beam shoot straight up from our freaking atmosphere up at where the craft just was.
Right
where
like
it was.
as a warning shot, like, hey, you're coming too fucking close, get out of here, clap clap.
So this also validates once again the reality of the black budget. The group was what we're going to call them. This is funny because I don't know if we even talked about it, but I'm in the middle of co-creating a TV show, and this TV show is about to be completely finished next week, finishing the series Bible in the last 8 seasons. But it all has to do with this. If you are fascinated by this stuff, pray to God it gets bought. But it all has to do with it all has to do with this subject matter, and essentially chronicling the past 100 years and the reality of this phenomena and every single thing we're talking about now, but a million times more in depth.
Quote unquote fictional, right?
Yeah, exactly. Quote unquote fictional series. And the people, though, that from a lot of the sources I've read, one in particular, we're saying the group. I'm saying the group right now because it essentially comes from one of these books, which the guy who's the head of the black budget organization, who basically controls the entire world. And when I say the black government or the group, quote unquote, this is made up of not only America, it's made up of Russia, it's made up of China, it's made up of everybody. The people that we claim are our enemies are 100% our allies in this. And all the stuff that's going on is really a facade. And the reality of this is we are far more allied with these nations than people have any fucking idea. But it's at such a black budget level that the mainstream society has zero clue. But we are very much allied with them. And in this disclosure of what this guy said before he died, he basically left 3 boxes of his journals to this author and said, here you go. He got called in randomly to an office in Century City where these lawyers were like, you need to settle an estate matter. And he's like, what the fuck are you talking about? They're like, just come in and settle this. And so he comes in, and it was this guy who had been leaking information to him for like the past 10 years, who sought him out because of everything he was doing with the disclosure movement. And he's a producer of a number of, like the Alien Autopsy and a number of these sightings, a show in the 90s and a bunch of other stuff. And so he willed him essentially 3 boxes of his journals. And he left him a note that said, you can do with these what you want, but if you release them, everyone you know will die. Like your family, you. Like, I cannot protect you, obviously. I'm no longer here. But like, if you release these, you will die. But if you can find another way to release them and get them out, the information out, maybe through a story, same type of thing, you can do that. But do not use any of the names. People are still alive who are in this, and blah, blah, blah. So he, similar to exactly what, Tom DeLong's done, but he did it before Tom DeLong, wrote these 3 series. It's supposed to be 4, but sadly he's arrested and in jail now before he released the 4th book.
Really?
And yep, him and his wife.
Oh, this is the guy you met, right?
Yeah, that's the author I tracked down.
What did they get arrested for?
Some tax thing, some bullshit. This guy was like a co-host of Coast to Coast forever, responsible for getting Pete Carroll at SC, BTW. He took Pete Carroll to Egypt. He was lived in Egypt for a long period of time. And I don't know if I want to. It's a story he told me.
Yeah.
But anyway,
it was a fictional story.
Yeah, fictional story.
Yeah, wink,
fictional
wink.
Story about
We're winking.
Pete Carroll making a pact with the Egyptian gods to have him get the perfect team and win a Super Bowl in the first 2 years. And what happened?
That's right. A ring.
Weird. Yep.
We got to update our sound effects on this.
Yeah. Boing. Ching.
Ding.
Yeah, bro. Where's your disc jockey sound effects here?
Oh no, we have them.
Do you?
We have it. Oh yeah, we got
throw it at me. Throw it at me.
We got to. There
You're
it is.
just now fucking busting that out. God damn it, Jaime.
Oh man, we
I
got.
click one random button. I don't know what the other ones do.
Bro.
You picked the best one.
Yeah, you picked the best one. Like, I thought you would have used that like 20 times by now.
Yeah.
Nope.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Wasted opportunities.
I think that's the other problem with the the whole UFO community is that you got some wild motherfuckers that you're just like, you can't take these guys serious.
Sure.
So, you know, a lot of
For
them.
sure.
Now I'm starting to see like, okay, Dr. So-and-so and Dr. blah, blah, and Sergeant, you know. But there's a
Look
lot
at
of
Ancient
the
Aliens,
people.
this fucking weird-haired motherfucker. I can't remember his name, but like he's the one in every alien meme, and it's shit like this. It just completely discredits the reality of this topic, and it's deliberate. It's like they don't think that it was an accident. They cast a guy like this to head off Ancient Aliens. And you know, people like Corey Good and a number of these other, you know, key players on Gaia and all this other stuff. And I'm telling you, I watch
It's wild.
everything.
It's
Like,
very wild.
It is very wild. But which is why the recommendations I give are deliberate, because they're meant to be the most credible. Now, the best way to go about this would be for you guys to read books, because there are countless books that you should read that nobody's getting a book published with, you know, generals' testimonies, you know, politicians' testimonies, pilots, doctors, like the most credible high-up people who have everything to lose by coming forward in the subject matter. No one's fucking publishing a book if it's bullshit. Not going to go through that effort. And there are tons of books out there that are all about this. There's, like I said, there's just an embarrassment, man. An embarrassment of fucking proof. Like it is... It really gets me mad sometimes. I try not to let it, because it is the journey of our species, and I've just had to accept that you know, there is a consciousness shift going on, and some people are going to make it and some people are not, and that is the consensus among the community and other communities that are woke in the real sense, not in this hyper PC sense, but really woke to the reality of our place in the universe, and the reality of the soul, the reality of consciousness, and the reality of our origin story and why we're here and who else is here.
But do you think it's the people's fault, or do you think it's the way the system wants to keep the people?
It's both, because we all have a choice,
right?
Like we're all
right,
we
but
all
but
have our,
no, we all have our choice. But come on, you know, it's back to what I was saying before. You know, you don't know what you don't know, and if you got people telling you, hey, you know, build houses. Here's a hammer. Here's nails. Here's table. Here's build, and you're just fucking. That's all you see. You don't know anything outside of that. That's not the kid's fault. And then you go to school, and they're teaching you that what your father's saying is the right thing. Then you go to college. It's like, okay, now you learn some business to create and build houses. And that's all you fucking, you don't know anything else. So do you think it's more system based?
That was 1,000%
1,000%
system based. But it's also lazy intellectual people, like who refuse to, like, I mean, so they're taking the sound bite, like they're not questioning anything. They've turned into sheep, which once again is not. I mean, it's the way the system is set up. This is brilliant. The smartest people in the world who've set the system up to essentially...
And they've done this over and over again.
Which ties also to what you mentioned a little bit ago. When those aliens, in theory, created us, they were creating ships and like hard workers. So we see it on nature also.
It is. We're a slave race. We have an affinity to serving somebody. And so hence dictatorships, hence, you know, presidents, like hence leaders of, like, you know,
no need, just regular work.
Just regular work. Yeah. Just anything, like
working for a company.
Yeah. Like exactly. There's a structure, and most people want to be told what to do. And
no, actually companies, and I actually did at Pepperdine, we did a little case study. Most companies want people from the neck down. They don't want them to think. They want, you check in. This is what you do.
That's what I'm saying.
You go with your hand.
No, that's what I'm saying.
I know, but it's not that people want that. It's that companies want their employees to be, okay, that's it. This is your job. Just do that. Don't do anything.
But most people, I'd say 80% of people are complacent with that. And then there's
because
a 20%
again,
of
there's schools and universities that's all they teach and preach, and again, that's all they know. You know, I give an example that if you know, every time I see somebody do something goofy, I'm like, well, and somebody complains, I'm like, well, if you were raised the same way they were raised and saw the same thing they would saw, you'd be doing the exact same thing.
100%.
You know?
I tell people the same thing all the time when it comes to terrorism or anything like that. I'm like, you judge these people, but if you were in their shoes and you were going up against, it's not a popular, you know, analogy to make, but like if you were a third world country by a superior invading force that technologically shit on you in every way, it was coming into your country and you could not match arms with them, you could not match technology with them, you could not do anything. Your only resort, the only option you have is fear. It's literally blowing yourself up in the street. That's all you have. And for people to be like, this is inhumane, like this is all they have. This is like war. They're fighting for their land and what they believe to be right, because everybody is justified in what they do. Like this idea of like, once again, good and evil doesn't really exist. There's positive and negative forces at work in the universe, yes, but they're ultimately all in balance. And every person, even the most sick, twisted motherfuckers on the planet, aren't doing things because they think they're evil. They're doing things because they think they're justified.
Right, they think
even
it's
if the
justified.
act itself may be conceived as evil, they're not doing it because they think they're evil. They're doing it because they have no other choice, or they're doing it because this was the way they were raised. This is all they know. And it is a point of empathy and compassion that I think is lacking in the world, is just this ability to understand. You can apply this to anything. Apply this to, sexism, racism, sexual orientation, this inability, like why we have these divides, which I, once again, don't really believe are there. I think the media overhypes them. But for the ones that are there, it's just this inability to understand what somebody else is going through, to be able to put yourself in their place and be like, shit, I guess that I could see why this would make them feel that way. Like if I had this upbringing, if this was my life and this and that and the other. And I feel like society has had a hard time doing that as of late. And I think the thing that would fix most things in society is empathy. It's just the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and understand where they're coming from. And
No, you have to, and that's something that people will never understand, what other people's struggle is. We kind of touched about on the aliens and spaceships, and another thing that kept crossing my mind when I was watching these videos is I've never seen them talk about weapons. I've never seen anybody talk about them attacking, and then I actually heard somebody say they're very peaceful in the sense of like Buddha and Gandhi. They're very. So do you think UFOs or aliens? Do you think they're just so fucking advanced they don't even care for war? Or
some of them, yeah.
I
think, and I think many of them are just so far beyond us in evolution that spiritually, especially. A lot of them. That's
because there's a lot of consciousness talk about this too.
Exactly, because a lot of the crafts, especially the ones that witness in at Mount Adams, they're not physical crafts. They're orbs. They're intense balls of energy that are there and changing colors and pulsing and going up and down, expanding and decreasing, seen a number of these things. And these are not necessarily physical crafts. Therefore, these are, once again, this is going to get into multidimensional theory, quantum physics and things like that. But these are beings that are so far down the evolutionary ladder that they've transcended physical form. Because ultimately, we're only in a physical form right now. We are consciousness. We are a soul, if you will, that is occupying a carbon-based being that is temporal. It's a temporal vessel that will die and return to the ground from whence it came, and our soul will carry on to the next. And whatever that next thing may be on our journey, that's what it is. But for right now, we are in the third dimension. This is where we're occupying space, and this is the plane of existence that we're operating on. But these other beings that are showing up here, some of them are like sixth, seventh dimensional beings, that have transcended beyond any of the stuff that we can't. We talk about magic, technology, showing, an iPhone to somebody 1700s. This is beyond magic to us. It's completely impossible. It's completely incomprehensible what these craft are, what these beings are. We don't understand any of it. We can't understand any of it. We're trying to grasp at straws and explain some of it, but it's really hard to do. As far as the weapons go, which is actually funny. That's perfect. That's what we were talking about before with the cannon that shot the laser at the ship in the stratosphere. That author who I tracked down, who made those 4 books, 3, based on all the disclosure from that guy in the group in the black government, mentioned a number of things that we have from Harp, which is essentially our weather control device, which we've had and we put in place. We tested it during the Vietnam War, and there is a number of videos of the pilots that operated these things and tested weather. We had changed weather during the Vietnam War to wash out bridges and do things in the Viet Cong so that we could essentially get ships and destroy bridges that they were trying to carry artillery and men across. And that was a proving ground for it. We possess this technology. We've had it, which then begs the question of hurricanes and all the disasters that have taken place at places like, the Katrina and all these other things, why we have either not stopped them or did we feed them? So
we can create weather or manipulate weather, or both.
Control. We can control weather. Then there is a device that they call in these books. This guy said is called Thor's hammer, which is essentially, I believe, what that weapon is that you see being shot at that craft. essentially like a pulse. It's like a massive pulse beam that is one of the few things that can disrupt one of these crafts that operate with an anti-gravity propulsion system. So how do you really knock one of those things out of the sky if it's technically not here? Which then gets into, as you've watched the Bob Lazar documentary, him trying to explain how the anti-gravity propulsion systems work.
Right. He's like, it's a bed. And it's like putting a bowling ball in a bed and then putting your hand in front of it, and the bowling ball rolls towards it.
So you're just distorting the gravity in front of it. Yeah. So the vehicle's almost just rolling forward. They're going, which is why if you've ever witnessed these things, they have a weird movement to them. It's almost like they're on puppet strings. Like someone's like, dancing with like a string, like a puppet on a string or something. But we do have this technology, and so do they. And there's actually the episode 6 of Unidentified. They go, and it's one of the most fascinating things in that entire series, is they go to Italy to talk with the head of all Italian intelligence and military, whatever the equivalent of that guy is in his team over there, the head of all military operations. And it was basically because we're one of the only countries that is not acknowledging this phenomenon. I mean, now we are, and the reasons for that I don't think are good. And I don't think they're being presented in a fair way because, once again, it seems like it is being framed only as they are a threat and that this is a problem and that, but they're also still not saying aliens. They're just saying it's an unidentified aircraft. The military is acknowledging we don't know what these things are. And so they're still leaving the door open for it being a man-made intelligence from, a potential, a China or a Russia or something like that. But if that was the case, if they believed that, they'd be shitting their pants right now because that's a military advantage that literally makes us absolutely vulnerable. Like, we can't do anything to defend them. If this was China or Russia or North Korea, anybody, especially if they were an enemy of the United States, we would be toast. We'd have been toast a long time ago. And so, maybe it's private sector. Maybe, it's, a Bezos or an Elon or a Rothschilds who, had their own technology that they've, had for a long time and are just out, buzzing around and fucking with our military. Sure, could be that. But it's most likely it's us in the black budget, which the government, the military has no awareness of whatsoever. They're not privy to any of this information. They don't know anything that's going on in these black budget programs. They're operating completely independently of all congressional oversight, all budget oversight, and all military oversight. Like these groups have accountability to nobody, and they're siphoning off trillions of dollars every year into these programs, which is why the war on drugs is still going, because that war is funding most of these operations.
The war on drugs?
Most of the money that we get from that, like we're allowing these people to rise, get big enough, and then we just go send in SEAL Team 6 and kill all of them and take all their money, and all that money goes to black budgets. Then we let a new one rise and do the same thing over and over. Like the war on drugs is.
That makes sense. Everybody's wondering where that money was going, anyways.
For sure, it's one of the biggest. I mean, the war on drugs. It's been admitted to be one of the biggest funder of the black budget programs, and so that's why this. They want to keep these things illegal. When everyone's like, fucking make them illegal and crime will go down. There'll be no more issues. And everybody.
Yeah, but they'll probably even get more money if they do legalize it.
They get tax money, but that's on the books. If it's on, then it's accounted for.
That makes sense.
So it has to be like black budget. So the weapon systems on these crafts. So Italy. So the last episode, they go to Italy and they speak to the heads of their military. And these guys are sharing with them a story that happened in Sicily, showing them pictures of this helicopter. So there's basically 3 fires that were started randomly in Sicily. And this is like mid-2000s maybe. And these fires were started from something being shot out of the water in the ocean. Something came from the water and hit 3 different houses and set them on fire. This military helicopter was dispatched to go investigate this. And while it was going, it was confronted by a UFO, by a craft in the sky. And this craft shot a laser at this fucking helicopter and shot it down out of the sky, a military helicopter. One of the first acts of war against, a civilized nation, military, since Vietnam, basically. And so they were showing Tom and Lou Elizondo and the heads of the To the Stars and, former ATIP programs, these pictures and discussing that, this is witnessed by tons of people, our pilots, our military, our radar. This guy was shot out of the sky. Here's the laser that came from this thing completely. It's almost like a pulse beam that we don't even know. We have no idea what it was. All it knows is that this thing defied all laws of physics.
Do they have pictures of the craft?
Yeah, there's a picture that a civilian took of the helicopter being chased by this thing, and you'd see this fucking craft saucer going after it. Like,
yeah, but do they have a picture of the helicopter, of the whole of the damage and everything else?
Yeah, they show the pictures of it.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. I kind of want to dive into. We're talking about segueing somewhat into weapons when you're talking about like what weapons do they possess and things like that. And
do they have some? Because a lot of the videos that I'm watching, they never talk about weapons. They never talk about anything. I've never seen anything from spaceships or videos that were getting attacked. We talked about us shooting them with maybe their technology, but nobody's talking about super duper weapons.
So they do. Obviously, they have insanely developed technology that's beyond anything we can kind of comprehend or contend with. I think the best way to do this is I want to give the audience and you guys a kind of like a very brief overview on, if you will, the past 100 years of our interaction with the UFO phenomena, as well as our suppression of information, as well as our the government's research into this topic. Now, for anybody that is, still skeptical on this, I mean, God help you. I'm approaching this kind of with the pretense that like this is a foregone conclusion. Just based on the math, which I think I might have touched on briefly last time, that this is a mathematical certainty that there's life outside this planet. And I'm going to go through this really, really, really quick before I dive into this whole backstory. But just for the basics, 13.8 billion year old universe, a 13.6 billion year old galaxy that we dwell in, which has 200 billion stars. Every star has an average of 10 exoplanets minimum and hundreds of moons. But for the sake of argument,
hundreds? I would have guessed it would be a lot more than that.
I'm being so conservative. I'm being so conservative.
Okay.
This is just for the sake of, every number I'm giving is beyond conservative, and the point will still be abundantly clear. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, in our own galaxy alone, 200 billion stars, 10 exoplanets per star, and 10 moons. Let's just say 10 moons. Just say 10 moons total. So you have 200 billion times 10 times 10. That is 20 trillion possibilities for life. So let's take a really conservative percentage of that might house intelligent life. Let's just start by saying 0.00001%. Which I think is 1/10,000% or something like that. 0.00, five or 4 zeros and a 1. So 5 digits beyond decimal point of that 20 trillion. That is 200 million planets that could house life. But let's just say people are like, oh man, the math on that is still, it would be way less than even 1/1000% or 1/10,000%. Okay, fine. Let's just say it's 0.000000001%. 10 zeros and a 1. 20 trillion times that is going to give you 2,000 planets. So let's just say in our galaxy, which is 160,000 light years across, there's just 2,000 planets that house intelligent life. But then you take a look at the universe. And the universe right now is, we constantly keep increasing the number of galaxies that we know are in it. But let's just, right now they're saying it's anywhere between 200 billion and 2 trillion galaxies. Let's just say 200 billion again. Let's just say 200, that's my watch. Let's just say 200 billion galaxies in the known universe. The largest galaxy of which has 100 trillion stars. One galaxy, 100 trillion stars. We're going to throw that out. For the sake of numbers again, we're just going to say, let's take that 200 billion galaxies and times an average of 500 billion stars per galaxy. Because our galaxy is really tiny, and there's obviously ones that have 100 trillion stars.
Yeah.
So we're not going to go 100 trillion. We'll just say 500 billion. That's a small number. 200 billion galaxies times 500 billion stars times 10 exoplanets times 10 moons times, once again, the 0.000000001% that there is life. With that, you have 1 quadrillion possibilities of life in the universe, which has nearly 14 billion years of evolution. Our planet has 4.8 billion years of evolution. So there are planets that have evolved for roughly 9 billion years longer than us in the galaxy. It is not a mathematical probability that there is life. It is an absolute certainty that there is life. And there is an absolute certainty that there is a mass amount of life within our galaxy alone. And not just life like us, life that we can't even comprehend. Just because like there are species that grow up that can thrive and grow in nitrogen atmospheres. We've already seen it. That cave that was just discovered somewhere like Romania or something like that, where they found 30 new species of animals. This cave has been sealed for 5 million years.
This was recent?
Yeah, has not seen anything. They found 30 new species of animals that have survived in zero oxygen, the cave had not seen any fresh air, any light of day for 5 million years. And they found 30 new species of creatures that have somehow managed to survive in pitch black with like no air and all this stuff.
They must have looked wild as fuck.
Oh yeah, like they're hybrids of like scorpions and crazy shit. Google is mind blowing. But life, according to Jurassic Park, to quote it, life finds a way. It does. And the universe is teeming with it. Okay, so we need to stop this debate about whether or not life exists. And not with you, it exists. It exists.
What do you think to the question of there's always a first?
It wouldn't be on a planet that's 4.8 billion years old in a galaxy that's 13.8. I can tell you that much.
That's true.
It would have happened a long fucking time ago, and it did. And once we touched on, which hopefully if we have time, we can really dive into the origin story of our species and the interaction between the ETs that created us, the hybrid, human race essentially that we are.
Do you think we were created here, or you think we were dropped off?
I think we were created here.
Do you think we were created on Earth?
Created here. Yeah.
Evolution.
No, I mean, I think we evolved as a monkey, and then the splicing of DNA with the monkey and a different race, not of this world, that came here.
But you don't think we were dropped off?
I don't think we were dropped off. Could be. But
I just always bring that point up because we're just not comfortable here.
Well, but I think that's part of our DNA. Part of the genetic splicing that took place is of a species that's not from here. And so part of that longingness is to the stars, is from whatever the planet is that we come from, which, the Egyptians believed was Orion. And so, I mean, Orion and Sirius. And so these are what a lot of the ancients believed to be our origin, and where we go when we die, the path of the soul, the Duat, the Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. These things all talk about essentially the soul's journey to this place. But I say that just once again because I don't want to have to defend that, because I feel like at this point, we know enough now that it's just, that debate is just utterly pointless to make anymore. Life exists. Whether or not you want to believe that they're here or not, that is what I'm going to try and prove to people, is that they're here, they've been here, and they have interfered with us since our beginning. So for the past 100 years within our country, we have had interactions with them. We've had interactions with them since the dawn of time. But let's just say since the 1930s, since essentially the first real UFO encounters that took place from Roswell in 1940, 43, I believe, or 47. Once again, these are going to be the dates. If I can't remember off the top of my head, just bear with me. It's going to be a vague time. 1940s. There was, in the 1930s through kind of 50s, such a massive influx of UFO sightings in this country. And people, no one was alive for this, really, who's alive today. I mean, there's some people. But back then, this was like a big fucking deal. UFOs were being seen all the time. And it was so frequent, in fact, that the military had to do something about it because the outcry from the public was getting so big. So the government then had to take this position of okay, well, we're going to investigate this. And I'm saying this because, once again, if this wasn't real, people, if this wasn't a real phenomenon, there would not be the countless studies done by the most brilliant people in our government and science community investigating this phenomena that did before all the information was suppressed. And there wouldn't be the embarrassment of riches. If this was any other subject matter, the amount of proof that is out there supporting this would have been accepted in any academic circle forever ago. But it's not. It's taboo, and it is looked upon as something of conspiracy and something, crazy, which was a part of the programming. Was if you used to say this in the 60s and 70s, it was meant to be viewed that you had a psychological program. That was the propaganda, the counterintelligence, and the disinformation campaigns. That was what they were designed
to the public, but yet scientists were interested in everybody that's encountered or saw or said.
100%. But that was how they were trying to do it, because they knew that the best way to deter you, which we might have talked about last time, the best way to deter you from looking into a subject is by having your peers be the one to shame you for it. Because if the government says you're crazy for it, you'd be like, fuck you, government. I don't care what you think. But if your parents, your friends, your coworkers, if you say something to them and they fucking Robert's a crazy guy, UFO nut, you are going to be far more reluctant to say you saw something, which is usually the case with most UFO abductees and people who've witnessed UFOs in their life. They're usually afraid to come forward. Less now, more people are more bold now and coming forward than they used to. But since that period of time, the government basically instituted what was known as the first real study into the UFO phenomenon, called Project Grudge. And I'm going to list all of these things because they're so detailed and so much to go into. But for those of you listening, these are the key things for you to start looking into on your own. And most of them are declassified, so you can go and look into this. Even though the conclusions they've drawn are absolute, utter horseshit, but that's already been proven that they were owned by the CIA, they were controlled. And the reason for these programs was never to prove UFOs were real. It was to discredit that they were real and find ways of essentially saying, look, it's not, this is a weather anomaly, or it's like a balloon in the sky or some other such nonsense. And any person that's really seen one of these with their real eyes knows 100% that is not what they are. But Project Grudge was the first thing that was instituted. Project Grudge then turned into Project Sign. Project Sign then was converted into what is widely known as Project Blue Book, which they have a TV series on History Channel, which is now like an X-Files, where they're doing fictional episodes based on some of the top UFO cases that were studied in Project Blue Book. But it's basically Project Blue Book was run by the Air Force and was taken to compile all of the UFO sightings. There was tens of thousands of these things coming in. So many UFO sightings from around the country, from pilots, from civilians, from military people, like all over. Granted, 80% of them could be explained away, but 20% couldn't. But that 20% was suppressed, and then the government deliberately focused on the ones from Joe Blow hillbilly who was like, I saw something in the backyard, like, so that they could basically discredit it and like, oh, this is just a weather anomaly, see, or this was just this or just that, like the Northern Lights, whatever it was. Deliberately framed it in a way and completely suppressed all the ones that could not be explained or identified. Then you had the Condon Committee. Then you had the Comeder Report. Then you had things like Project, and by the way, Comeder Report and Project Condon.
I was going to say break them down a little bit as you go through.
Condon Report, or the Condon Committee, also the Condon Report, and it was also the same, similar as the Robertson Panel. These were things that were put together essentially by high-level academics and military officials, but they were said to be scientific and academic, but were funded by the NSA and the CIA. Yeah. And so once again, and now it's admitted like the same thing. These guys and the people who worked on these panels all came forward and said, like, we were literally, our agenda from the start, our directive was to not take this seriously and just disprove it. Like, that was it. It was never meant to be a serious investigation into any of this. It was all meant to, once again, just kind of prove it wrong. And so, the Condon Committee was set up by the CIA and controlled by them. The Colorado study, which was done at the University of Colorado by a professor and physicist, Edward Condon, who was the head of the independent scientific investigation on the UFOs after the embarrassment of Project Blue Book and essentially what was known as the swamp gas cover-up. So there was a mass sighting that took place, Ohio, I think, was known as the swamp gas incident. And so there's about 200 co-ed students and like 5 police officers that essentially witnessed these UFO crafts like flying around essentially their school. Like, everybody came out and saw it. They were flying around, chased by police officers, like coming, like, hovering over police cars, like 50 feet above them. This whole mass sighting that took place. And these idiots at Project Blue Book came out. They had to discredit this because this was a mass sighting. And so they said it was swamp gas, which was the most ridiculous, insane, stupid fucking
just hearing that sounds stupid.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, it's just, like a little fireball that could be created by plant erosion or some shit and then, like, igniting, and that was what they saw. Like, are you kidding me? Like, first off, just absolute insult. An insult to the intelligence of the American people, but also to the people who witnessed this thing and were changed for the rest of their life from seeing it. That made Project Blue Book essentially, that was the downhill spiral of them that lost all their credibility, and that the public realized that they were full of shit. So the Air Force essentially drew their conclusion with Project Blue Book and said, okay, well, we're discontinuing this because we have decided that these unidentified aerial phenomena that we're experiencing are not a threat to the sanctity of the U.S. or our airspace. They're not a threat to us. Therefore, it does not warrant any more investigation. They didn't say they weren't real. They just said, we've determined they're not a threat. So they closed Project Blue Book publicly, naturally kept it open, on a secret military level, and continued this investigation very, very heavily. But they lost the credibility. They then did the Condon Report, aka the Condon Committee, which was with these scientists, a panel that was put together at the University of Colorado, but was also funded by the CIA. And they drew the same conclusion, a 1,480-page paper essentially drawing their conclusion, which was all absolute utter nonsense and was later found out to be the same thing. And then you had the Robertson Panel, which was declassified in 1975 and outlawed the government's cover-ups, disinformation strategies for propaganda and debunking the UFOs. They were to infiltrate private groups, spy on them as well, outlined education programs, movies, false explanations, etc.
I mean, this is a timeline breaking down everything.
This is in order of how all these government.
This is something you created, you put together based on.
Oh yeah, real stuff. Yeah.
But is this your own list, or
my own list.
Okay, I was going to see if people can access something.
Oh no, they can access all this online.
Yeah.
I'm giving you like the key list. So like, I'm going to run through the names one more time. These are things that you just pause, rewind, and go back if you want to dive into these and know the origin. And it starts kind of in this order: Project Grudge, Project Sign, Project Blue Book, the Robertson Panel, the Condon Committee, aka the Condon Report, the Cometa Report, which is the British one, which we'll talk about now, Project Candon, which is the French one, which we'll also talk about, National Security Act of 1947, which was a creation of the NSA, the NSC, and MJ-12, the Majestic 12. The Majestic 12 is in of itself another thing to dive into. That was a secret committee that was put together by the higher-ups of the military and government to look into the UFO phenomena. They've tried to pretend like this wasn't a real thing and didn't exist, but it 100% does, and there's enough documentation to prove that. And then you have, current things going on like ATIP, which is in the unidentified series, which is AATIP, Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program. Then things like Operation Paperclip, they're in. These are just
just to get started.
Some things just to get started. When I say there is an embarrassment of proof, you have to realize there is tons more. These are just official government reports. The Cometa Report was essentially done by the MOD, the Ministry of Defense, in Britain, and that was essentially they monitored, I think, from 1996 to 2002, 12,000 UFO cases, and they then declassified them and released them to the public. Was it Project Candon? UK's defense. Sorry, my apologies. Project Candon, CANDIGN was the MOD's one. And they basically released it's like 12,000, declassified 12,000 UFO reports, 10,000 UFO reports in 2006. And so this is once again under the Freedom of Information Act. You can go through and look. The UK didn't care. They're like, here you go. Here's 10,000 cases that we've been studying. You guys can check them out. Naturally, tons of them are redacted. Like it's never a full release, but enough so that the point is still there. So then it must be the Cometa Report is the French one. The French drew the conclusion at the end of the Cometa Report that UFOs are in fact real and they are in fact not of this world. That was the conclusion of the heads of their military and the heads of their government, and they wrote some 1,200-page report documenting this as well after studying it for many, many years. This was released to a New York Times reporter, I believe, who was herself a major skeptic. And then she wrote the book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. And it was after they sent her a private copy of this as a skeptic that Leslie Kean is the author and was the reporter, I believe, New York Times. Once again, don't quote me on that. But she was a reporter.
We won't.
She probably will. Yeah. She wrote this book, which outlines, some of the biggest cases that there ever were. And once again, as the title suggests, generals, pilots, and government officials go on the record. So there have been countless reports. The same in Italy, like we were talking about with the one that got shot down. They all have, same with Russia. They all have. It's not like this is only happening in America. It's happening everywhere.
Worldwide.
America is the one.
They had the stuff in Peru. They had stuff in South America. They had
South
stuff in Mexico.
Full of it. Mexico's full of it. Tons of sightings in South America, Mexico.
Yeah, everybody's fucking reported something. And everybody has seen the videos. Even the people that don't look for it have seen a video of like, look what just happened here.
Yep. And this is the thing though, is the government has been investigating this and still are heavily. And they have classified, declassified, and done so much stuff. You think if this was nonsense, that they would have ever invested over the past 100 years, the resources that they have into this and the amount of money that they have put into suppressing this for counterintelligence and disinformation campaigns, for destroying people's careers and reputations of anybody
and killing
who's come
people
out,
in some
killing
cases.
people, 100% killing people. There are tons of deathbed confessions that I've watched of people who worked at places like Area 51, people who worked for crash retrieval, UFO crash retrieval teams whose sole job was to go retrieve wreckage from UFOs that we shot down. And talk about the bodies that they encountered, living and dead, the things that they saw. These guys have nothing to gain. They're not on CNN. No one's paying them anything. Like, they have held this secret their whole entire life, and now they're going to die, and they don't care anymore. And they're like, look, the world needs to know this because this changes fucking everything. Changes everything. And it does. It changes everything. And which is why I get so unbelievably passionate about it, because this is one subject that, the government completely suppresses. But there's many of them they do.
I gotta ask, and I'm not trying to break away from this train of thought. You've been doing this for over 10 years. What got you? What was the spark? What was the moment where you're like, "Fuck, this is some deep shit. This is where I'm gonna spend the next 10. This is where I'm gonna spend the rest of my life just researching this."
It didn't necessarily start with that, but
what was the aha moment? Like,
the aha moment was, like I said, I was raised in a very kind of conservative Christian upbringing, and I was the guy in college who would debate everybody. I was captain Christian conservative guy who debate every raging liberal that was out there. Like, I was the one guy in the sea of them, and like, I was a great debater, like a very good debater. I was kind of what I won nationals at, and granted, most people can't debate. Most people only know talking points. Most people are not educated on subjects to be able to debate them with any form of intellectual integrity whatsoever. But there were some. And those some, especially when it came to debating religion, that threw things at me that I didn't have answers for, that were holes in my faith that I also couldn't reconcile. That if I was going to be intellectually honest with myself, I had the choice. It's either that moment, and everybody has it, where they're either going to blindly follow something despite contradictory evidence, or they're going to swallow their pride, admit they're wrong, and learn more.
yeah,
And that was the moment for me when I had to do that, because there are things that I couldn't reconcile within that. And that led me then to, like we talked about before, I only believe this because I was raised to believe it. If I was raised in the Middle East, I would be believing a completely different thing.
Yeah.
And I would be completely justified to believe that. Like, that would be my paradigm. That would be my reality. And so the only reason why I believed what I believed was because I was raised where I was by the people I was raised by. And they, once again, are amazing people, did the best they could with what they knew at the time. And that's how life works. It's the same with all of our parents, like the same with everything. But I could not reconcile those holes, those issues. And so that led the investigation, like, well, then I should probably, if I'm ever going to say I believe in something like a faith, like in a God or religion or anything, I definitely need to know what all the others are saying, what every other religion has to say, because they all think they're right. What makes me think I'm right? How dare I say that my way is the right way when I've never looked into anybody else's religion or anybody else's explanation for the origin of us and why we're here, where we're going, the fundamental questions that plague every human being. Why are we here? Where are we going? What does it all mean? What is God? Like, what is purpose? Like, all of this stuff. So then I started looking into other religions. Naturally started looking into science, what science had to say, what is its explanation, which you're bombarded with throughout school anyway. But it's also just a very agenda-ridden, limited view on science. And science is one of the worst religions there is. And I always say, and, my brother even says, that it progresses one funeral at a time. And it does, because these people, these scientists who devote their life to one field of study, have given 30 years to it. They're like, literally, you talk about like some pastor who's devoted his whole life to a religion. You think like at the very last minute, he's going to change his tune and risk like his whole entire life being alive?
His family, safety.
Fuck no, they're not.
Kids.
No. It's ego 100%. And science is full of some of the biggest egomaniacs that there are, and they're stubborn more than anything. And they say it progresses one funeral at a time, because it takes the old guard dying and the new blood coming in, for them to for a new information to be accepted and shared, where it's normally repressed, ridiculed, and shamed out of existence by their academic peers. Went into science. Science led into space, led into the reality of the universe. And once you start diving into, which is really what it started with, just the absolute vastness of space.
It's so fascinating.
So fucking fascinating.
It's hypnotizing. It's beautiful. It's poetic. It's amazing.
It is. It's one of the most magnificent things there are.
It's scary too.
It is. It is.
You know why they call space?
Why?
Because there's so much of it.
So much of it.
That's right.
Yeah. But it's one of those things that when you look at, like, it's, and I think this is one of the things that we've lost in our digital.
I'm his face. I love I'm his face. He's gonna use that one tomorrow at work.
He's like, I'm taking that.
Bro, you've told me that one like 400 times.
It's not for you, bro. It's not for you.
Don't tell me then. Don't tell me then.
But it's one of the things I think we've lost.
Fuck, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
With technology and just the advancement of civilization in our industrial cities and light pollution, we don't see the stars anymore. Back in the day,
that's what I was gonna say when you were talking about back in the days, light pollution.
Yeah, we used to be able to stare
everything.
out and look at the stars, and like at night, you lay out in your tent in your village and wherever you were, and you would look up at the majesty above you, and you would contemplate you're a speck of dust. And like what it all, it was a humbling moment that we don't do anymore. We don't get anymore because we don't see the stars unless you're fortunate enough to, like, live outside of one of these cities. But even then, most people aren't just laying out on their backs when they're kids. Maybe you're outside on a trampoline, sleeping outside at night or whatever, like, and you're looking up and pondering those questions. But we've lost that. And when you do that, like, the wonder it fills you with, and the humbling that happens to your soul of like, I am nothing. This planet is nothing. Like, what does it all mean? Like, we're just a speck of dust. I mean, it gave you the numbers and the size of the universe.
No, it's insane. I think the last crazy fact also that I was just reading about was that they're realizing that the solar system is not just still; it's actually moving through.
Expanding, for sure. Yeah.
Well, it's
moving,
expanding, but we're moving as well as we're rotating. We're actually moving. And
space is constantly. That's the theory, is because everything is expanding out, and every galaxy is surrounded by a black hole. Yeah. That is what's at the center of it. So we're all we're in a spiral galaxy.
We're in a spiral galaxy.
Everything's being sucked into that.
And then you're like, fuck, man, we're just these people with bones, and our skin's being hang on to our bones, and we're just flying through space.
Anything can kill us. We're so susceptible to death, like at all times. Like whenever you lose your health for a second, you realize how fragile you are.
There's a guy that describes us as blood balloons. We're blood balloons, Anything touched, It's
true.
We're so fucking delicate.
Little meat puppets. And but that was what led to it. It was then that fascination and that exploration of the universe, that ultimately led to then life outside of us.
Right.
And that was where it all started, because once I dove into the reality, and I really dove into space, I really dove into like the science of it, the vastness of it. Like, I watched, I can't tell you how many countless documentaries and books and stuff just on that. And it's in the conclusion, there's just like, there's no way there's not life. There's no way there's not life out there.
There's no way.
And then that led to me then investigating the phenomena itself. And that started the rabbit hole. And it is a rabbit hole. And once you go down it, you will never come out. Like, you can't unknown, you can't unsee the things that you
What do you think, before people start diving in and jump into this rabbit hole, is there people that you'd recommend, like, you probably shouldn't do it because it's fucking deep and it's just gonna it's gonna wake you up at a point. It's gonna change the way everything looks, and because I'm sure there's people that lost their wives, not to death, but because their wives are like, I can't stand this shit. Like, you quit your job or you did this. It changed your lifestyle. Do you think this is recommended for many people?
I think it is, but I think that's a personality trait more than anything.
Because some people get fucking addicted.
Sure. Yeah. It was very all consuming for me, but I never let it, take over my social life, I guess. Maybe I did. But like it was, to me, it was nothing was more important than this, because it was the fundamental questions of our existence in the universe and our paradigm that we have all blindly accepted by the ruling elite that have told us this, whether it was from religious institutions or tyrannical governments or whoever was put in power. Like, they have dictated what the reality of our existence is and refused to bend on it. Look at every, Egyptologist that's out there. Like, they refuse to compromise on the reality of new information that's been brought forth about the reality of that civilization, how old it really is, and what they were really fixated on and the technology they really possessed. They refused to change that narrative. I think it is for everybody, man. I can tell you this, though, that the first 2 years of it for me were kind of dark. But the
times are different too.
Yeah.
Because you had to dig a little bit deeper to get the information that now we could just...
Yeah, I did, but it was also, it was kind of a dark time, because it was, the paradigm shift is not easy. It's a difficult adjustment when you realize everything your life you believe to be true is not anymore. And especially if that's grounded in a religious ideology, that is very difficult. When you talk of heaven and hell and where your soul's going and stuff that you're raised to believe, and you're suddenly now like, what do I believe now? Am I going to go to hell for thinking? Like, if you're not a religious person, you don't ever have to deal with that. But like, that Catholic guilt type thing. But that was a difficult period. But once I got through it, I have never been more at peace ever in my entire life, because this reality is far more amazing, far more encouraging, and far more peaceful than anything. The reality, the nature of the soul, the infinite aspect of it, that we are this energy source that is a part of God, the ultimate source that, is the creator of all things, neither masculine nor feminine, like this God-like energy that it does not care about the things that we claim it cares about in religion, like the things that are used for control, those laws, those rules, those things like that really suppress people, that really suppress their creativity, their happiness, their desires to do things. The infinite nature of the soul, man, this is just one of our experiences. Like, this is just one life that we're going to live out of so many. So many. And that is the coolest thing of all.
That's wild.
That eliminates the fear of death. That eliminates all power that can be held over you in this life. And yeah, religion does offer that to a degree, but it also offers a very scary look at the afterlife if you don't abide by these rules,
right? But
things like that.
Exactly. But I think religion was more created to, create law and tell people, hey, don't kill, don't murder, don't do this. This is not right. It created balance. And if it wasn't for religion, we probably wouldn't have this many people in the world.
Well, society definitely needs rules to occupy or to live by, guidelines. But like, I think most rational people are going to abide by them inherently. I mean, it's when you get into the crazy rules of like, don't jerk off, Timmy, because God's watching you and you're going to go to hell. Like, to deny your literally your biological primal drive that you have inherently genetically in
that's
you.
A problem.
Like, deny that for your life.
Monkeys do it, and they're not concerned about.
Nothing.
Well, that's how they were talking about, because then it was like you can't masturbate because the devil's watching. You're going to go to hell. Then it was like, okay, you couldn't masturbate or you can do whatever you want, but you have to finish inside of a woman because you have to create baby, because that's what man and woman was made for.
Need more population.
Then they found out the whole animal, and they're like, wait a minute, there's male and male. There's some gay animal sex going on. And that's in nature. So that must be normal. It just, it changes.
There's so much. I mean, like I said, when you dive into the legalism of a lot of religions, most of that is man-made. Most of that was never in any original text whatsoever.
Oh, 100%.
And almost all religions stem from essentially ancient Sumer. Ancient Sumer was the oldest recorded religion. That's where we get our origin epic, the origin story of like Adam and Eve. I
think that goes back, 6,000 max religions. Mm-hmm. We've been around for what? Our current species has been around for 200,000 years?
Yeah, I think they found
the current
300,000, something like that now. But yeah,
it goes back.
Yeah,
but our current,
that's what they say. But yeah, and so
who's they? No, scientists. Scientists. You dumb fucks. Whoever's questioned them.
There you go. Dude, why?
We need more of those.
I wish you were doing that the whole time.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to did I answer the question before I jump back in? What was the original question? I think we got it. We might have just went off on a tangent.
I think yeah. The original question was pretty fucking deep.
Okay, I think we got it. We covered it. If not, we're diving back in. We're diving back into.
You were going to talk about origin, I think.
I will, but let me finish the past 100 years of this. So I've given you some of the things to look into as far as particular reports and things of that nature. You need to realize that there have been also countless pilots and military officials that have come forward from World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War, the band Foo Fighters got their name from Foo Fighters, which is what we called UFOs that we encountered in World War II. UFOs that would fuck with our planes, shoot them down.
That's right. The Foo Fighters are super UFO.
Yep. And we're always around and always fucking with our Air Force and Naval Air Force throughout World War II. Foo Fighters were the term that was used, code name back then, to tell, essentially command that there are UFOs around, and there are these unidentified things. They call them Foo Fighters. Same thing happened, and there are tons of reports and you can watch them, Google them. MUFON Network has a lot of these. They have I think a show called Hangar One, which is actually decent, all things considered, to get a lot of these stories. MUFON is a mutual UFO network, which is essentially one of the public domains where people, if you see a UFO, you report it to them. And it's a very rigorous process of everything you have to fill out: time, date, location, like altitude, where things were, a full written report, then pictures and videos, and then they have their team that goes through and just checks for the credibility.
They should create an app.
They have an app, I think.
Yeah, it'd be easier because it just has a time, place, video, like Citizen.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how in depth the app would be with that yet, but like they have a reporting mechanism, and so they have a show based on this. Some of the most compelling UFO reports, and they have a lot of them from like military people, and a lot of an episode that's dedicated strictly to like the Vietnam War and the Korean War, and the stories of these things blowing up our battleships and outside the China Sea and up these rivers.
So they have attacked.
100%. They attacked because our initial operating procedure by the military was, if you would see them, engage them. If you're in war and they're there, like, shoot them. And every time they did that, we got fucked up. They destroyed us. It wasn't even fair. Tons of pilots were shot down. Tons of like ships were destroyed. And it got to a point that post the Vietnam War, that finally we had to change our protocol, and the military changed its directive. And once again, this just proves this happens so often that the military put out protocol saying that if you see them, do not engage, and furthermore, get the fuck out of their way. If you see them, you didn't see them, and that is it. You leave them alone. They're there, and that's it. That became the protocol since the 70s. Post-Vietnam War, that has been the military's reaction to these things. Hence what you even see with the gimbal, the Tic Tac, and the Go Fast videos that were just declassified. These guys didn't engage. They didn't do anything. They observed them, but they didn't shoot anything at them. I think a number of them didn't even have ordnance on their fighter jets when they ran into them. One of them was on a training mission. But that is the protocol. So the military has this in fact. So it shows one of two things. One, it's all that it's us, and they don't want us to shoot down our own craft because, like, if we're fired upon, they're going to fire upon them. But it also shows that there is a technology that exists by unknown occupants that has been around since the frickin' 40s that has been shooting us out of the sky, and they're always around during military conflict. Always, every single war throughout history, they have been there. I mean, the speculation is that they're observing us. There's countless reports of this too. They hang around our nuclear facilities during, the Manhattan Project, which was essentially the creation of the atom bomb. It was called the Manhattan Project. And so that essentially took place in what's called the NTS, the Nevada Test Sites, which is where Area 51 is.
Somebody was telling me that, or not telling me, but one of the videos I was watching that you recommended was talking about they don't want the human species to, fucking
blow up our fucking planet.
Yeah, blow up our fucking planet.
And so that is one of the theories. Stephen Greer takes that stance, but he believes that it's all benevolent and they're here to make sure that we if they care about us and maybe, or maybe they're also just checking to make sure that see where we're at, see if we evolved, have we got to this point.
Well, last time you were also talking about our resources. Mm-hmm. They're interested, or they're protecting it, or
I mean, and we are ourselves a potential resource, which gets into a different aspect of the abduction phenomena and what some of their intents for us are. And
there's a point that I think you mentioned to me at some point that they don't want us to send nuclear weapons to space. They've disconnected.
We split the atom. Yeah, and when we did that, we have no clue. When you talk about then quantum physics and multiple dimensional theory, we don't know the ramifications of what happens when we split an atom. You're splitting the very fabric of space and time. That has ramifications, not just here, but in other dimensions that we're not even aware of. And when we did that, that was when we saw the biggest mass influx of UFO presence on our planet. The creation of the atom bomb historically was when the mass influx of UFO activity happened on our planet, and it has not left ever since. Ever since we possessed nuclear weapons, they have been here in force. There's theories and that one guy in the black government says because we, with the Philadelphia experiment, when we essentially cloaked this aircraft carrier, we made it disappear and reappear 300 miles away, which, there's a debate whether or not that really happened, but there's enough information about it that Tesla was a part of it. Einstein was a part of it. Werner von Braun was a part of it. And they were they got a lot of the guys from the Manhattan Project while we were creating the atom bomb to work on the Philadelphia experiment. And essentially we found a way to cloak a ship, not just make it disappear from radar, to actually make it disappear. And so the stories with this go is it disappeared, and we had like a minimal crew on it of like 25 guys or something like that. And there's guys that were outside on the ship, and there are a couple of guys that were in near like the reactor core of this, the technology essentially that was allowing it to essentially transcend space and time and reappear somewhere else. Everybody that was outside of that room where that took place, when the ship reappeared, were essentially ripped to pieces and fused into the steel of the ship. Like body parts, like sewn and like fused into the ship in different areas. And the guys that were inside, essentially. So
the people outside were infused,
yeah, just ripped.
But the people inside
were fine. But as weeks went on, essentially, like there were these time rifts that essentially, like they all ended up disappearing. One of them, just like the story goes, he got up, he's watching like TV and went up and just walked through a wall and disappeared and never came back.
Sounds like some fucking Twilight Zone shit.
Yeah.
It's so fucking crazy.
It is. But when we did that, the rumor is that we also tore holes in space and time. We tested this thing a number of times. And when we did, we created portals to other dimensions that were not aware of us, that were not aware of our presence. And now they're aware of our presence. And now they're here. And some of them are not as friendly as others. I say these things. This is, once again, 10 years of investigating everything. So I take in all information. How much of this I can verify? Not much. So it's not necessarily what I'm going to lead off with when I'm talking to people about trying to build credibility in the subject matter. Yeah. This is going to require a little more suspension of disbelief. However, once you see this stuff with your own eyes, once you admit to yourself and realize that it is real and your paradigm shifts, you have no choice but to accept all of these as possible, because then it is all possible. Nothing is science fiction anymore. It is all real. Everything is possible.
I think there's proof of that now, in the sense of everything we saw in the Star Wars movies, everything we saw in Star Trek back in the 70s, 80s, their little tablets, all this shit. Like, we're seeing it now.
Science fiction becomes science fact.
Yeah, it's gnarly.
And that's been disclosure.
And that's another crazy thing. How did these fucking directors and movies get so much information, to make these predictions? I mean, it wasn't a prediction at the time. It was a movie, like, the future's going to be this. I mean, at this point, I think the only people that got it wrong that everybody thought would be right was Back to the Future, the fucking hoverboard skateboards.
Still fucking waiting for that thing.
Yeah, or flying cars.
I wanted that so bad.
That's the only thing that you see.
We do have those things.
But the Star Trek stuff and the Star Wars has more shit that's we're doing now than anything else.
For sure. I wanted the hoverboard so fucking bad.
Oh, we all wanted the hoverboard. God, I wanted the fucking flying car too. Yeah. But Elon Musk says never.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it already exists, but it's not in that form.
Yeah, but
you wouldn't need a car.
Never that.
Yeah.
He said, you want a flying car, just put wheels on a helicopter.
Yeah, exactly.
There it is.
It's not, the flying car is impractical by nature as far as what we would.
Air pollution, air noise, fucking crashes, danger.
It's not going to be where it ends up going.
Yeah.
So that is a very brief overview, and essentially that those operating procedures have guided us ever since, as far as our tactics for dealing with UFO craft. Avoid at all costs, and do not engage. They're there. There's nothing we can do about it, which is fucking scary in and of itself, but they're there. And so they have chose to keep this information, as secret as they can. But the way technology is advanced, the way information is disseminated now, there's no way to do that. And now, because of things like this, because of things like the internet, there can be people that come out and voice this stuff without being suppressed by mainstream media. But you then have, so these are some things, if you guys want to dive into some of the most insanely documented, credible cases that exist of mass UFO sightings, I strongly recommend you look into the Belgian wave, the Washington flyover. Washington flyover happened in the 50s. This was a 3-day flyover of which UFOs, mass fleets of them, flew over our nation's capital unimpeded. We launched fighter crafts, like whatever Air Force base was right there was like under construction, or so we had to fly one from like an hour away or whatever. We scrambled jets to come, and these things just mocked them with their capabilities, like flew all around them. We chased these things all over DC for 3 days, witnessed by tons of people, newspaper reports about it, Congress discussed it, everything. The Washington flyover, Belgian wave, same thing, triangular craft, multiple sightings over a couple days, multiple police officers, military, jets scrambled, thousands of witnesses. Roswell, New Mexico, obviously everybody knows that. The swamp gas incident, which I just talked about. The Phoenix Lights, which happened, I believe, in 1998, which is the largest mass sighting to date, which happened in Phoenix. A triangular craft, roughly 2 miles long, flew over and basically blacked out the city of the sky above the city of Phoenix, witnessed by thousands of people, recorded by many. Governor did tried damage control on this and made light of it, brought some guy in the ET suit to a press conference and been like, you guys are way too jumpy, blah, blah. Like, tried passing it off as it being military flares being dropped. Well, people watched this craft completely silently, 2 miles long, triangular craft, fly over, black out the sky. One of the most heavily documented things. And this same governor, 20 years later, has gone on the record and said, I saw it too. And I apologize to everybody because I think it was disrespectful what we did, but I saw it too, and it was real, and it happened. The NASA laser from Earth One is great. The Sicily helicopter. For all of you who want to play this back, I'm just going to read some of these. There's a UFO incident, the U.S. Cavalry horseshoe incident, which happened in 1908, I believe. Cape Codere in 1941, Battle of Los Angeles, mass sighting that happened in 1942. This is one of the craziest ones, newspaper things about this. When we were at war, we're afraid the Japanese were going to invade. We had our whole western coast, including Catalina, full of bunkers, full of military, essentially artillery and ordnance guarding our coastline from Japanese invasion. During that time, right off the coast of Santa Monica, there was a saucer craft that appeared. Pictures of this front page of the newspaper with all these spotlights on it. We launched 1,300 rounds. Yep, that's it right there. 1,300 rounds of ordnance at this thing. 1,300 rounds of ordnance we launched at this thing. Didn't phase it. Insane. Didn't do anything. Just sat there and then disappeared. Obviously, this was caused tons of buzz. The military came out with their same bullshit Roswell thing and said it was an air balloon. An air balloon that didn't go down with 13,000 rounds of ordnance, or 1,300 rounds of ordnance that hit it. Nothing happened to it. Battle of LA is one of the big ones in 1942. Roswell falling to earth, which is a 1948 Kentucky Air National Guard captain, was chasing one of these things in a F-51 fighter. He chased it up to 25,000 feet until he lost consciousness and fell back down to the earth. The Chile's Windig case, 1948. The green fireballs, which is another mass sighting, 1949. The McMinnville UFO photographs are one of the most undisputed photographs from the 1950s that still to this day have not been debunked. The Korean War, Port of Incheon in the 1950s. Korean War Iron Triangle incident. Korean War, March 1952. Pentagon admitted after the end of the war that they had 24 encounters with flying saucers over North Korea during that war. The head general admitted that. The flying saucer wave of 1952, which is known as also as the Washington flop or the Washington flyover. Nash Fork and Berry incident, abduction case, 1952, Polish George Hadamaski, abduction case, Skinwalker Ranch, abduction, UFO, Kingman, Arizona, UFO crash, 1953. I mean, literally, I could go Barney and Beverly Hill also.
And we'll put a list in the description so everybody can just, do their own research.
I know it's a lot, but I'm only saying this because I have to speak in vague generalities with a lot of this stuff because there's so much information that I can't go into all of them at once. Yeah. But I do want to at least cite some things just so the people listening know that I'm not just saying, vague generality. No, these are...
No, which people will appreciate because a lot of people won't do the research. Yes. And you...
There is an embarrassment. I literally have not even touched upon any of this stuff. That's you. Oh, really? Who's vibrating?
I don't see. Sorry. I don't see anything.
Weird. We have a rogue phone.
Yeah.
A rogue phone going off. Anyway, so that is a very brief overview on some of the highlights of our engagement with them and the suppression of this information over the past 100 years within our country. When we're going to talk about then, essentially the origin stories, the theories and the best explanation so far of of our species on this planet. So you have, I referenced the book God's Man in War, which I believe is one of the best academic looks at every single religion compiled by this triple PhD in Eastern religion, Western religion, and occultism, who co-wrote this book with Tom DeLong. And it is this look at every single religion and the parallels between all of them as it pertains to the UFO phenomena. It is, once again, the one that starts with the cargo cult theory I was telling you of how we, that tribe on the island in the South Pacific viewed the planes that came by and ended up worshiping them. That was the pretense of the book. That was the foundation of the argument, is that this is what we do. This is what a primitive society does when they can't explain technology. They worship it as a god. That is what essentially happened. And so the pretense also is that we're not here to convince you UFOs are real, like they're real. And so we're not debating that fact. We're just now going to analyze history, like the origin of all religions, the origin of everything, with that in mind as the explanation for things versus countless gods that every single religion, has and worships, but yet all have this similarity. And so it breaks these things down, and it goes down, I said, obviously, to the epics. So the Anunnaki, which is an ancient, Zechariah Sitchin, another person for you guys to look up, wrote a number of books that have to do
What's the name?
Zechariah Sitchin.
Sitchin.
Is an author and one of the foremost kind of authorities on ancient Sumer, who studied Sumer in its original language so that he could really decipher the tablets accurately. And also, I think, Israeli, a couple other languages or whatever that they currently reside in, so that he could get the best interpretation of these tablets, because it is the oldest religion, and the one that, once again, we get in the Christian faith, Genesis and Exodus from, like the whole origin story of Adam and Eve, the Tower of Babel, the Great Flood. All of this stuff come from that epic. Same with most other religions; they have a very similar origin story. And so, the Anunnaki was believed to be the race of beings that came to this planet, and essentially, as he states, created this hybrid race of us, of essentially a monkey and them. And there we are, which is what kind of explains essentially the missing link, and how, if on this planet evolution is real, which we all know it is, and you have 4.8 billion years of everything evolving from a single cell organism and goo to all the vast variants of life that we have on this planet, why are we the only species that seems to have minimum of millions and millions of years of evolution beyond anybody else, as far as our ability to be past the basic primal instincts of feed, fuck, survive? Where we contemplate our own existence, we're philosophical. We have the ability to. I'm blanking on the actual term for it, but essentially contemplate. Question why we're here. No other animal does that.
While at the same time, what Robert was mentioning, we are extremely uncomfortable with wherever environment we're in.
Yeah. There's an alienation that we have kind of on this planet in a weird way, and so it is believed that they created us. According to the text, he believes that we were created to mine gold. Essentially, gold had a very valuable property, and it does within space, especially for space travel, because it's one of the things that we use on all of the windows, I guess, in our spacecraft and the space stations, because it blocks out like all gamma rays and other types of radiation. Gold is a great blocker for this, so it has a tremendous value. Like, why do you think we ever decided gold was a precious metal to begin with? Where do you think that fucking came from? We decided like that. I mean, there are other.
It's the texture. It's what it's made. It's the purity. It's a great conductor. It's
for sure.
Easy to bend.
But back then,
even back then.
But you think about all the other precious jewels that exist and things that
because
like
they were
agates
unique
and things like that look very pretty but have no value today, but look just as beautiful. Like these other beautiful rocks,
like emeralds, diamonds, rubies.
But for some reason,
gold
unique. Standard. Gold has always been
because it's limited.
Mm-hmm. But all things are limited on this planet. Like all those, diamonds.
There's a lot of stuff that we make,
some of it
we can copy. You can't, there still hasn't been a good fake gold chain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right, bro.
There hasn't. It really hasn't. And it's funny. No, it's I love gold. No, I like gold. And it's funny because people are like, oh, your gold looks, so yellow. And it's like, well, in the U.S., people stick with 10 karat, 14 karat, whatever. But in other countries, in China, for thousands of years, they've been pressuring, and not pressuring, but love and respect that fucking gold, or Arab countries, etc. Anyways, please.
Yeah, I mean,
but why gold? Because it has
properties for spacefaring races. I mean, is
that what it is?
Yeah, because it has a lot of. I mean, there's a lot of magnetic properties to it. A lot of way it binds. You know, we're made of stardust, as you know. I mean, every single thing on this planet, our biological being, every little element that we have, every vitamin, every mineral, everything that we need to survive that makes up our body came from a star that went supernova and shot out through the universe and seeded life throughout the planet. Yeah. So, I mean, it makes sense that, like, you know, there's certain things that are needed in our diet and needed for other things. And so gold just has, I'm forgetting on all the properties, but I've read a number of the stuff of all the insane things that gold can do.
It's one of the best conductors in the world. We just don't use it because it's so expensive.
Exactly. So a lot of that stuff. That was supposedly why they came here to essentially mine for this, and they wanted a slave race that could essentially do this, because monkeys were too primitive, but they also had the strength, and they were an indigenous species that was all over the place here. And so they basically, they couldn't really talk. They couldn't do anything. They're just like, but they're here. So they
but they can grab objects. And
they had the opposable thumbs. Like, exactly. They're closest to like an upright. They're the closest thing to them, and so they essentially created us, which explains a lot of all these questions of like the junk DNA that everyone discards. 90% of our DNA, whatever it is composed of like junk DNA that we still don't know what it does, but it fucking does something. We just don't know what it does. These stop and start points on our DNA chain, the limited, our life expectancy, like we cannot live longer than 120 years, but yet we have all of this documentation throughout all of old religious texts of people like Methuselah and these other ancients that lived to be 875 years old. The average life expectancy back then was above between 500 and 800 years before the Great Flood. Really? Yeah. Oh yeah. People lived forever back then, but now.
But did they keep good track time? No, I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, but I mean, that's the thing. Like, so this is like where
who was really keeping track. Like, I'm turning 100 today.
I'm sure they were. They kept track of a lot of stuff. Like, I mean, it was enough that they noted these things all throughout every religious text, like the lineage of people, how long they lived, the years of their life, everything. Like, if you ever read Exodus or like Leviticus or any of these things, they're the most. Not Exodus, but like Leviticus or Numbers, or one of the Numbers, I think. It's like just the most daunting book that just literally talks about the ages and lineage of all of these people from the Bible, like from Adam's to Noah's to Moses, all these people, how long they lived, how long their kids lived, like everything, a full detailed documentation of their lives and how long they lived on this earth and what they did. And all of that changed after the flood. So a lot of it changed after the Tower of Babel. So this is also where, this is also in the original epic of the Sumerian epic. So you have the Nephilim. So have you heard of the Nephilim? So the Nephilim is in Sumer and in the Bible and a number of other religious texts, it is discussed. So there is a point where it says that the sons of God came down and laid with the daughters of men, and they created offspring. So sons of God came down and laid with the daughters of men. So gods fucked women on earth, and they created this hybrid offspring. This hybrid offspring was known as the Nephilim. And this is written in, so the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I'm sure you're familiar, heard about, is essentially where we uncovered, I was actually right there when I was in the Middle East. That's right where they found it, in the cave, really? The cave they found it in. We found all of these lost books of the Old Testament. All of these things, Christianity and all these other faiths have cherry-picked the books of the Bible that they keep in. They have cherry-picked what they choose to believe to be like, even though there's all these other texts, all these other accounts of things, they only chose what backed up what they wanted, the version of the story that they wanted to tell. They found all these others, and a lot of them went into great detail. I think it's the Book of Enoch. Oh my God. The Book of Enoch, which is found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, goes into insane detail about the Nephilim. So this was what caused the Great Flood. So the God saw that the sons of God bred with the daughters of men and created these abominations on earth, created these hybrids. These hybrids were giants. They were giants among men, 12 to 25 feet tall. They were these beasts, because they not only fucked women, they fucked beasts of the sea. They created essentially like everything that you've heard about from the Minotaurs, like these insane beasts of lore, all came from this, essentially these angels, these aliens coming down and essentially interbreeding with various species on our planet, and they created the Nephilim. And they essentially ruled the earth for a long period of time. They were wiping out men and became incredibly corrupt. and could communicate. They even talk about that, like these beasts, these hybrid ones that were able to have full conversation. They spoke words the same way we did, but we're like beasts, which give all the more like credence to the lore and the stuff that we read. A lot of people think of like, all these legends and lore of these things, like, Andre the Giant, or, whatever, pick your fucking fantasy story that people are like,
Medusa,
oh, that never happened. Yeah.
Whatever.
I believe it's all real. Like, why would people
even like the Greek gods, all that stuff?
100%. 100%. Yeah. And our military acknowledges that and references that in Tom's book. They're saying the Greek gods have more to do with
Egyptian
any of this
gods
stuff.
also.
Yeah, Egyptian gods.
There's more proof and more people talking about the Egyptian gods that, but the
Homer's Odyssey, all this shit, bro.
The
Anubis,
mythical,
all these people,
the mythical gods,
mythical stuff
are for sure
all real. But they're once again not gods.
Right.
Like, and so you also,
it depends who you're talking to and what they believe, how they present it.
But we called them gods because they possessed like, abilities and powers and size and like, mutations that like were not normal for, the average human being. But essentially God saw this. Gods, the prior race of us, saw what had been done, that their people came down and basically really fucked with the workings on this. They had a great thing going with this slave race of people on this planet, and basically like, well, we're wiping this out and we're starting over. And so the great flood came, which is referenced in every religion on the planet at the exact same time. They all talk about the exact same thing happening. It happened, which is crazy. And so it happened, and wiped out, essentially hit this reset button on society to wipe out essentially these abominations that were created on this planet that were running amok and becoming incredibly corrupt and doing all sorts of terrible things. And so they wanted to hit reset and have a species again that they could have full control over, not ones that thought they were gods. And the same thing happened with the Tower of Babel, which you may or may not be familiar with, but that's also an Old Testament story, also from Sumer, where mankind started to become very enlightened and very evolved and wanted to become like the gods that created them. So they built the Tower of Babel to reach into the heavens, essentially to have ships that they could take off and go fly with the gods and things like that. So this is all referencing like Sumer, referencing flying ships and things like that. Like, I mean, it's so insane when you actually look into it and you're like, it makes so much more sense, this version of things, than anything else ever could. That they also then destroyed the Tower of Babel and confused all the languages on the earth. And that's supposedly how we have the different races of people and the different languages. Because if we were not united as one consciousness, we cannot rise up and become like gods. And so hence this ongoing battle of consciousness has never ceased. We are constantly divided. We are constantly divided by race, sex, sexual orientation, political views, everything and anything, nationality, anything they can do to divide us, because it is known and been proven that mass consciousness united for one cause can literally shift the planet on its axis. You can affect the outcomes of things. And there's tons of scientific studies that show this by flipping a coin over and over, which would have a random probability that if you do that, the machine will do it randomly. But if you sit there and you have somebody sit there and focus on saying heads, 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 heads over each time, it will skew the average of that, which should be 50-50 and will always be 50-50 if you average it out. It will skew it in favor of heads. There is power to consciousness. And we talked about this before, that you manifest everything in your life constantly, for better or worse. We are authors of our own reality. Energy is real. The universe is malleable, and we're creating it at all times. And that is one of the biggest secrets that is suppressed and repressed by these beings. And that was one of the time what mankind realized, oh shit, we can do this. And we have erected this insane monument, this Tower of Babel, celebrating ourselves, and we are becoming like the gods. And we have all come together and put all of our strength and all of our mind together and done this. And they were like, nope, that's not happening.
They stopped it.
And so that is the race. When we talk about the suppression of this information, it is believed that that they are coming back, that they are the ones coming back, and they cannot know that we have achieved the things that we have achieved, that we have been reverse engineering the things that we have on this planet, because if they do, they will wipe it out again. And that is why it is kept a secret. It's not necessarily to keep it from the public, because everyone's like, oh, the people can't handle the truth. People can handle the truth. And outside of some insane, ideologues on whatever side, maybe they might lose their shit. But the most people are pretty rational. And I think at this point have grasped this concept, and it wouldn't necessarily, it'd be a hard pill to swallow maybe, but it wouldn't you wouldn't see them killing themselves or looting in the streets or whatever. And so it's not that, I don't think that's the real reason for it, and not the reason that is being stated anyway by the powers that be who are coming forward with this stuff. But that was essentially, the kind of the origin, and that after the Nephilim kind of ruled the earth, and there was remnants of them after, because then if you go further in the Bible, like in the Old Testament, you have I'm pretty sure you've heard the story of David and Goliath.
Of course.
Goliath was one of those Nephilim, and they talk about it. He was one of the last tribes of them. They didn't wipe them all out. The flood wiped out most things, but there were still, and I think it was Jericho. There was another city that they talk about when the Israelites were fleeing Egypt and trying to find the promised land or whatever, that God promised them this one city, and Joshua or somebody went and scouted it, and they came back and they said, it is full of giants. Like, we are grasshoppers to them. Like, nobody would use that. That is a very extreme, like, comparison. We are fucking grasshoppers compared to them. Giants, 25 feet tall. Massive, massive, massive beings. And there are skeletons that are found of these. You can Google them. There are femurs that people have dug up of a man's body that are the size of a full-grown man, just the femur of the leg. They are real. They existed, and they were here, and we have proof of this.
And they hide it, no?
100% they hide it. Like the Smithsonian, we dug up a lot of them here in America. I think in Ohio, there's a number of mounds that were found where we found these tombs of giants. The Smithsonian came and claimed them, and then they never saw the light of day again. But we found giants. Giants are everywhere.
Didn't they say there was when we landed on the moon, they saw giants?
When we landed on the moon, we saw other beings, and they told us, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah,
that's why the moon landed.
I heard there was giants like on the dark side of the moon, like giants.
Oh, I mean, maybe. Which one is that?
Oh,
yeah. That's one of them.
Yeah, it's just an image of
Whoa,
one of the skeletons.
The skull of the guy.
it's a skull the size of a fucking person's, size of a person.
Yeah,
that's fucking crazy,
bro. I'm telling you, like it's out there. Like
biblical
nobody
giants
looks.
in Greece.
Yes,
that's what you can Google.
Yeah,
biblical giants in Greece.
Yep.
Fucking insane.
It's
so
all
this
real.
is the
It's all real. This is the but it was the remnants of the Nephilim that made it after, and it's referenced in all the religious texts. And we found skeletons. It's not fictitious. Where'd they come from? We don't grow that big.
Yeah.
How are they here? Like, I mean, it was.
Do you think it was the environment? Oh yeah. And what is that? Like a gunshot?
I doubt it. I don't know.
Like a laser beam shot, fucking from back then?
Maybe.
Who knows?
Or maybe the ear.
Do you think it was the environment, the atmosphere, the air quality,
that had to do with dinosaurs? But that was, I mean,
no, I understand that.
65 million years ago.
Yeah, no, I know that.
Yeah,
Wait a minute, dinosaurs and people didn't coexist?
Apparently not.
The Flintstones? What?
Flintstones? Wait a minute.
Hey,
Hanna-Barbera would never lie to me.
You crossed the line right
yeah,
there. I believed you until you
unplug
said
his
that.
mic. God damn it!
This interview is over.
Yeah, but you don't think the environment's back?
No. I mean, not that recently. I mean, that they're claiming, this stuff took place fucking 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago. There's no atmospheric difference back then. Not to that level.
Gravity.
I mean, nothing. We would have had far more evidence of that.
Do we have any proof of our gravity changing?
I mean, that's the ongoing theory that they believe is why everything grew so big in the dynastic or the Jurassic periods, like the 100 million year period that dinosaurs essentially ruled the earth. Was a result of everything growing big. Everything back then was massive, so much bigger. More oxygen in the air, and so
oxygen or anything to do with their gravity. Sorry, I know this is.
I thought it had to do with oxygen. Like
no, so did I.
Yeah,
I absolutely heard oxygen, but then I'm thinking gravity, like holding.
I don't think our gravity would have shifted, because if that's the case, maybe that could
well,
be.
Maybe
that
we are
I mean,
flying.
Yeah.
We are flying through. Anyways,
but the mass of the center of Earth is the same.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. I think our atmosphere or gravity has pretty much been the same throughout that time.
Right. The size of the Earth hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed.
Our core is the same.
The orbit hasn't changed.
Yeah. That's a silly question, Jaime.
Yeah. Unplug his mic.
Unplug his mic. But yeah, please, the giants.
But so all of this, this is all a part of our history.
Yeah.
This is all a part of history that's suppressed, but this out there, and it's the reality of it. And all of these texts, like people think like, oh, we already know. I'm going to make this point very clear. We already know that the Egyptian civilization achieved levels of technology that we cannot replicate today. They were around before the last ice age, the Younger Dryas period, 12,000 years ago. We know the Sphinx predates that now. We know that based on water erosion around it. Our carbon dating methods are completely flawed because soil can change and shift based on cataclysms that can happen, great floods, things like that disturb soil because you're using soil to date things.
Asteroids blasting.
Yeah, you can't date a rock. So these we know based on we just think that like we can't replicate the pyramids and everything with the technology of what the Egyptians harnessed back then, the things that they did. They were a civilization that was in touch with the universe. They lived in harmony with our planet, and they achieved levels of consciousness that we have failed to do in this reiteration of humankind. After that reset button that happened with the last ice age, the Younger Dryas, there was a reset button on civilization, which has happened, I think, 7 times in the past 150,000 years. There were 7 cataclysms that essentially hit reset for all of civilization. And each time, all the technology was lost before that. Things like the city of Atlantis, which was believed to be, what the foundation of most of Egyptians' technology came from Atlantis, which is 100% a real thing. And people think that like back then, like, oh, they just wrote all of this shit for fun. It was just like, they were just writing like stories, and they thought these cool fictitious stories were worth etching on walls to be left for fucking eternity. Like, are you kidding me? Like the messages left behind, the stories being told are not lore. They were very important messages that they were trying to convey to future generations after they were gone, which is why those monuments still stand, these megalithic structures around the world. Chichen Itza, all throughout South America, throughout China, throughout the Middle East, these pyramids are everywhere. We're finding them in Turkey now. The Göbekli Tepe was the most recent one that was dug up. These, Stonehenge, these things, like, they knew back then to make things that would last. Everything we've made now is temporary. The next cataclysm is wiping everything out. We don't have fucking pyramids that we've made, no stone structures. This is steel and wood and plastic.
Just cement buildings or wood buildings.
It's going to be destroyed. It's going to be nothing, reduced to rubble. But they knew, and they had the technology back then to accomplish these feats with laser precision, laser accuracy, perfect understanding of magnetism.
You've seen them. You were there, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're the most awe-inspiring thing you'll ever see. Like, and it's anyone that wants to diminish this and pretend like these guys were some primitive torch burning like people that was made by a slave colony by a pharaoh. Are you fucking kidding me? You know the intelligence it took to build that? Like, you think some uneducated mass of like 1 million slaves who could achieve a level of architecture like that? No fucking way. No way. Like, it's just logic. It is like simple logic. And if people can step back and look at these things in that way, then they start to really understand that our history, we do, as Graham Hancock says, we're a species with amnesia. We don't know our own history. We don't know what we achieved before this. We don't know what the people that came before us really did, but they knew far more than we did, and they achieved it now. The reset button that happened after the Younger Dryas, our evolution since then has been completely flawed. Like, we are destructive to this planet. We're destructive to each other. Everything is combustion. Everything is destroying resources, using things versus being in harmony with anything from like telepathy to the energy, the magnetic pull of the planet, like harnessing these elements and things that like we dismiss as like pseudoscience, as not even possible, but they didn't. This is what all of this is about. I mean, the whole religion philosophy of the Egyptians is all about death. They were fascinated and fixated on death, not in a morbid way, but because death is a transition. Everything in those tombs, everything with the Book of the Dead, the Duat, and everything had to do with the soul's transition to the next life.
Reincarnation,
the next level, like everything. This is just a transitional period. Like this is important, but it's all about that. It's all about consciousness. The Fibonacci series, if you've dove into that at all, I don't know how familiar you are with the Fibonacci sequence.
I'm not.
Fibonacci sequence is a mathematical, they call it the formula for life. It is the mathematical equation for life, and it is seen in everything that occurs naturally. And the Egyptians knew this, and they built their temples based on Fibonacci series. And the Fibonacci series, basically, if you were to do it mathematically, you have a 1, then a 1. The next number in the sequence is going to be the sum of the previous 2. So it's 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. Then you're going to have, so it's going to be 1, 1, and 2. Then it's going to be 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 plus 3 is 8, and so on and so forth. It's the sum of the number before it. So it's this equation that keeps going in this pattern and expands out in perfect balance. It is seen in pine cones. It is seen in feathers. It is seen in artichokes. It is seen in every single thing that grows or naturally. Same with horns on a ram. The way the horns spiral out, it is 100% mathematically identical to the Fibonacci sequence. And when this thing extrapolates itself out, it is in perfect balance. So the ram's head is never weighed down by the weight because it's carrying these massive horns, because it's growing out in this mathematical harmony of this Fibonacci sequence. Egyptians knew this, and it was seen in everything they built. And especially the Temple of Life. The Temple of Life that they had there was made based on this, because that equation is the equation of life. And they understood this. Like, they understood so much, man. Like,
what about that building in Joshua Tree that we've both been at? The
Integratron.
Integratron. What do you think
that's
is
the dome building, right?
Yeah. What do you think is
what
the
goes on
cost
there?
for that? Yeah. Why do they decide to drop these blueprints?
The aliens that the guys, yeah. So
Well, just to clarify what Jaime is saying, what's he talking about?
so the Integratron is this building out Palms. I'm trying to think of this. It's right outside of Joshua Tree. It's the city next to it. It's still technically kind of Joshua Tree, but it's right there, and it's right next to this structure called the Giant Rock. It's on top of a massive ley line that goes through. Joshua Tree is as well. It's a vortex basically on this planet, a massive conduction of energy that naturally flows through our planet, which is exactly what the pyramids are all built on. They're all on these same ley lines, naturally occurring throughout the planet, and these civilizations knew this. Which, how the fuck would they know that? How would they know any of that? We don't even. I mean, we barely know it now. Like, we're just now discovering this stuff, but they knew it. So there's this guy who kind of started almost this alien cult in the 60s, blanking on his name, but he said he was in touch, I believe, with the Palladians or the Nordics, one of these alien races, and they told him how to build this thing called the Integratron, which was acoustically the most. It has the best acoustics, naturally occurring vibrations out of any structure like on the planet. And people go there for sound bath. Musicians go there. It is the most pure form of sound and vibration created. And they supposedly gave him the blueprints, and he built this right out in the middle of the desert. And it's there. And because they believed it, I think they told him how to do with, vibration, healing, which is what the Egyptians believed. Egyptians had vibration temples that they had that were strictly for healing, based on vibration alone, like changing vibrations to heal you, which we have some science backing now, but once again, it's still mainstream doesn't want to accept it, especially big pharma. Right. Some natural way of healing you. But
what? Pharma doesn't want that?
Yeah, no, they don't. Say that.
Strange.
Yeah, they don't want psychedelics either.
George Van Tassel.
That's the next one.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And so there's things out there, and you can pay. It's like a massive wait list to get into it, but they'll do like sound baths and
we went on by there with the ride. Jaime took me, and it was just a big fucking line. Almost impossible to get in.
Yeah. I've been there multiple times and still never actually gone into it. I've gone to Giant Rock.
You haven't been inside?
No.
So you got to make like a reservation, right?
In advance.
Giant Rock.
Yeah.
That was one of the. So we went separately, and we both had the same feeling.
Some locals there that are.
Well, there were some locals trying to not let you be there for whatever reason. They're like kind of like. They show up locals. With a couple of trucks, dirt bikes, and they kind of make you
scare you away.
Yeah, they scare you out.
Back the fuck out.
Really, aggressive.
Like Deliverance type shit.
Yeah.
But at the moment when you get there and they haven't showed up yet, because it's weird because they showed up like 10 minutes, 15 minutes after we got there.
Yeah.
You have this feeling that you are in the wrong place. That you are like, I probably
like in a bad neighborhood, but in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of nowhere, there's nothing else other than the time I went, like just like a full moon.
What is it, like negative energy, or it's just like
I don't know, but
the Native Americans worshipped that area for a long time. They were set up there, like they knew it had like special powers. And
you feel really, really
feel
uncomfortable.
Weird there. Yeah, it's a weird energy. It's very weird. Like Joshua Tree. Joshua Tree has an insane energy. It's not like that. It's not. It doesn't give you a weird, dark feeling.
In Joshua Tree, I feel relaxed.
Yeah.
But if you go to this rock, you just feel really, really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You're like,
It's a very
there's
weird
nothing
feeling.
going on here,
Yeah.
but I really want to leave. I don't know why.
It's very weird. I camped out there.
Oh, you camped out there?
Yeah.
Not.
No, separate thing. It was a very, very bad night, very strange night. We left, and it was also part of the company that we were with. But it's very weird. I truly believe Joshua Tree is a portal, 100%. And that's not just because I go out there and do psychedelics, but because
And it's not an accident that there's also a military base and all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, all that stuff right out there. Yeah. And the fact that those trees only grow there and like nowhere else in the world. It's also very strange.
And just for the people that don't know, Joshua Trees, you can Google it, but it's by Palm Springs, 29 Palms, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. A great place. 100%. One of the best national parks we have in California.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so the origin of our species and the reality of these things, I try to say this, and there's so much to unpack in that, but I'll kind of go with this. With the reality of the civilizations that preceded us, they had technology, they had mass things that we cannot replicate to this day. And yet we still are academics are trying to tell us that they were, hunter-gatherers back then, and yet they achieved marvels, even though we now know that the Egyptians essentially took over those pyramids. It was they were there before that, the race that was because they're pre
so I'm gonna cut you off 1 second because I just saw something.
That was such a Robert thing to do.
A little bit curious.
Colin's gonna be proud of you.
Good one. Joshua trees only grow in Joshua Tree and Jerusalem.
Oh, Jerusalem too. I thought there was
only
Joshua
a
Tree.
Small spot in Jerusalem and Joshua Tree. That's it in the whole world.
Maybe they took them from Joshua Tree and put them in Jerusalem. Because Joshua Tree, they seem natural, like
or the opposite.
Maybe,
or the opposite of the opposite.
Which is double the opposite.
Now let's find the location of each place and see if they're centered and lined up with each other.
That'd be crazy. Yeah, if it naturally was occurring.
Oh, that'd be great discovery right here on the Right Boundless podcast.
Yeah, seriously. somebody look into that. I'm busy. I have so much stuff I'm researching. But we're told by academics that these guys could never have achieved anything, and yet they did, and yet they have things that we can't even fathom or replicate today. And
with the equipment that we have today.
And that we think that the stuff that they wrote about is just fantasy and lore, but it's not. It was written about because it was real and it really happened. And when you start looking at history through that lens, that these were real events, suddenly a completely different picture of the origin of our species, the origin of essentially this recent re-evolution of us suddenly starts to make more sense. And I try to tell people that it's like, okay, what makes more sense? And I say this once again, like I'm not trying to offend anybody of any type of religious background, but if you look at it from the sense of like a God that just suddenly just randomly decided 7,000 years ago to create life on this planet, create humans and throw us here for whatever reason. And then rule, in secret, and then kind of disappears. The New Testament went on, or whatever. Pick whatever your religion. I mean, I'm most versed in that because of how I grew up, so I can speak to it a lot better. But you have just this God in the sky that some people claim wear Birkenstocks or robes or whatever, like that just decided to create mankind on this planet a few thousand years ago, or knowing what we know about science and evolution and how things evolved and how things have evolved on this planet and what we are currently doing now with technology. And I always bring up, my brother who's, I think, founded 4 biotech companies at this point, and has been playing God in many ways with genetics. And we've already done it. We've cloned things, 20 years ago. We are doing things in biotech and genetics and cell therapy and things that like we are playing God. We are doing this already. We are creating hybrids, and China's been doing it off the books for a while. We just had here to different regulations here. Otherwise, we'd be farther along in these creations and creating superhumans and doing all this stuff and eliminating disease and all these other stuff. But we're just regulated, so we can't. But we've had the technology for a long time now to do it. We're already doing that now, and we are a primitive fucking race in the scheme of things still. So what will we be doing in 100 years if you keep this technology going? The way we're advancing right now, picture us in 100 years. Picture what we'll be doing then. And that's just 100 years of a civilization that is supposedly only, that's only been here for a few thousand years, evolving, Before that, we were just cavemen, according to what they want to tell you. And now we're doing this on a planet that's 4.8 billion years old. What makes more sense then? That knowing there's this missing link between us and monkeys on this planet, that we are the one race on this planet that seems to be far more evolved than any other species on here, yet we all evolved here at the same time, okay? What makes more sense then? A god in the sky just poof, put humans here, or that an intelligent race of beings came here that has millions of years more evolution, billions of years more evolution, or even if you want to just be conservative, picture us in 100 years, it could just be us going back in time and doing it. Whatever it is, we're already doing it. So we know we can do this. So why would it be a stretch to think that another species who's already been spacefaring, because there are civilizations that have been evolving for up to 9 billion years longer than us, came here and literally just toyed with the DNA of a monkey and created a hybrid, and here we are, and here's this, doesn't that seem a little more feasible and rational given what we know now and what we know about there being life outside this planet and all the proof of them being here, the embarrassment of proof that exists, all of these encounters that are just, there's so much of it.
Nate, if you put it like that, then yes.
It's all about framing. It's all about framing.
We've talked about it before scientifically. Where is the human evolution of any other animal?
That's what I'm saying.
And why only monkeys?
Yeah.
In theory.
Yeah.
Because, for example, dolphins. Okay, you can give me the argument that the monkeys were, more intelligent, and then we came out of those, and then somehow we're more intelligent than any other animal species, right? But in theory, dolphins are intelligent. Where is the human, coming out of the dolphin?
Equivalent of that, yeah. Well, and they've also, this gets into a different realm. We're also so not advanced in our understanding of anything that who's to say these animals are not hyper intelligent? We just don't understand them. They're doing things. They communicate with sonar. They communicate they have a language all their own, and they communicate through vibration. That's why when you have a dog, I think dogs are some of the most evolved species on the planet now because of their evolution with mankind. That you can have a dog if you have one, and you realize after years of relationship with that animal that you communicate with that animal through looks, through feelings. You understand what it's thinking. It understands what you're thinking. It comforts you when you're sad. It defends you if there's a bad energy around from somebody that's encountered. They are very evolved with us. They communicate. We communicate with them on a conscious level that we're not fully even aware of, but we do. And it's all in the eyes. And so we've already been doing that with dogs, and cats don't really give a shit. They're less less codependent. But what's to say that the animals out there, like dolphins and other animals, are not communicating in the same way with each other? Just because we can't understand it, doesn't mean that they're not doing the same thing. They could be very evolved, and we just aren't aware of it because we've developed our communication skills through language.
Yeah, it's funny because I'd had a conversation about how in tuned we were with our planet. Before technology. We knew, supposedly we knew when it was going to rain, we knew it was sunset, we knew when there was going to be a storm, hurricane.
Oh, yeah.
But what's interesting is my grandma did that in Cuba. And she lived out, out away from the city. And in Cuba, she was able to predict a lot of things.
A chaman.
And they would ask her, how did you do this? How did you get away with this? Do you feel it? Do you do this? Do you do that? And her response was real simple. No, I studied the animals. The animals know.
Oh, the animals know.
And that the animal, when the birds fly. And,
watch them take off when a tsunami comes.
Exactly.
Yeah, they know.
And before an earthquake, you hear about the dogs, dogs barking, the cats acting out, the zoo animals. They sense it before it fucking happens. Yeah. And it's not. And again, it's back to another point why I keep saying, are we from here? Were we just placed here? Because all the animals relate to something.
Yeah.
We're counting on them.
Yeah. And let me know, it brings up a good point that I feel I should clarify too.
Please.
Just know that there are many explanations for our origin here. Panspermia is a big one. And I also kind of buy into that as well, that the life was seeded from, a planet destroyed somewhere else that housed life similar to us, that another planet that had humans on it.
It's like the Superman story.
Yeah, a very similar thing. And panspermia happened, and that's how, the universe gets soiled essentially with different life throughout it. And so that is a very accepted not fully accepted, but still more accepted than, I guess, what I'm talking about as far as explanation for how human life came to this planet. So there are many explanations for this. And when I'm presenting this particular one, it's not to say that it's necessarily the right one. There's a lot of explanations for it, but I believe that there is a lot of evidence backing it, and there is a lot of data, a lot of declassified things, and a lot of people who work in this realm who have said similar things, but it's not mainstream. And so it's just end up kind of being the explanation that I am somewhat in line with most right now for things. But ultimately, what the fuck do I know?
A whole fucking lot.
But even then, I don't.
That's
the worst part of this rabbit hole is the deeper you go, the more you don't know. And the more you learn you don't know. And it becomes an all-consuming thing, which is why they call it the rabbit hole.
So you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
That's exactly.
But you don't know.
But that statement's so deep.
It's so deep, bro.
It's just...
You threw that out last time, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I've done it a couple times. Jaime loves it.
A few.
Yeah, every episode...
And we didn't even get into, abductions.
No, we're going to have to do a 2.0,
no, go for it.
2.3.
Go for it. Do it.
Hotspots, abductions.
Talk about abduction. The communion. Communion is really important. Because Nate recommended me to read this book. 3 pages into it, I shit in my pants, close it, never opened it again.
So I want to talk about abduction really quick because we haven't really dove into that topic, and I think it's a very important and massive...
it's got to be one of the most important topics. No, you could just do that while he's talking. You don't have to...
No, I kind of like the pause. It really adds to the effect.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I could also delete it later. So.
No, you keep that shit in.
The sound?
The abduction topic, and I want to preface it with this, which is one of the most fascinating things, and I can't remember what researcher said this, about the difference between the abduction phenomena and things like legend and lore, are that legend changes over time. Someone like you pass a story down from generation to generation, it gets distorted. It's like playing the telephone game. The message keeps getting distorted, like it changes. And like whatever that original legend or story was is now kind of something completely different.
Yeah.
But with the abduction phenomena, it is the exact same today as it was 100 years ago. And it's been going on for longer than that and been written about in a number of, ancient literatures from the Dark Ages to religions and things like that. A lot of these experiences that they were talking about, religious experiences almost, are believed to be that. But that phenomena has never changed. There are through lines with every encounter with the abduction phenomena that anyone who experiences it says the same thing. And I recommended that book, Communion by Whitley Strieber, which I strongly recommend everyone reads. If you want to be scared alone at night, it will definitely...
Go to Joshua Tree, read it out there.
Jesus, yeah. Don't do that. Or do that. Depends what you're going to do. If you read that book, written by, Whitley Strieber, who I believe is a Harvard... I know he's for sure Harvard educated, but I can't remember if he was actually a Harvard professor of psychology as well. I think he was, or at the very least, he paired with people from the Harvard psychiatric department to do studies with him. And he was a skeptic, never believed in any of this stuff, but realized that he had been abducted his whole life and had these insanely traumatic experiences. And he wrote this book about them and about coming to terms as a skeptic, as an academic, as a psychologist with the subject matter that is completely faux pas and written off as like a mental illness.
Once more, that brings a lot of, breaking the credibility of his own studies.
100%. Right? Yeah, he risks everything to do that. Anybody who comes out in any type of academic circle, scientific circle, political, military, whatever it is, and says anything about this risks exile, and is usually what happens as a result of it. That's why pilots, whenever they see UFOs, they never say anything about it because they'll get their wings clipped and they won't fly again, which is the most fucked up thing because there are reports of these British airlines where there were like 50 people in the airplane that all witnessed a UFO over the UK, a massive one the size of like 3 football fields, and the 2 pilots also saw it and corroborated the story and they got fired. And so this stuff happens all the time. And so for him to come forward and make a book about this, which was unprecedented at the time, took a lot of courage, but also showed the sincerity and the reality of this phenomenon because the people who experience abduction, the level of trauma and post-traumatic stress that comes from it is incredibly severe. worse in many cases than molestation and, soldiers coming back from war, because this defies understanding, because you're violated in ways that you can't really describe, by beings that you also can't describe, in a ship that you also that shouldn't be there. Like, everything about it is so unbelievably traumatizing that the brain, as it does with all trauma, usually tries to suppress it. And most people do. They suppress this stuff because it's so traumatic and so difficult to deal with. And it leads to, down the road, alcoholism, suicide, things like that. And so he wrote this book and started kind of like a group about it. And if you read this book, you will have it is one of the most academically honest books that looks into this phenomena with the most educated and trained people in the psychiatric field, showing that this is not a disorder. These events actually happen. These people aren't making them up, because the level of trauma that they've gone through is not possible with a nightmare or something like that. It is beyond real. And his accounts of his UFO abductions and watching his kids get abducted and him being powerless in his bed as these beings come in and take him unconsciously and hover him out, float him out through the door, insane. And seeing his kids going the same thing. It's very troubling. And if you've ever been abducted and have repressed it or unaware of it, or you've ever had things like missing time, which is a big indicator of abduction, where you can't account for a period of time. I don't know what the fuck happened in the last 12 hours. I'm just on my couch and I don't know what happened the last, I can't account for it. Suddenly the next day, missing time and things like that are always indicative of abduction phenomena. And so if you read this book and you've had anything like that, you will 100%, it will pull it out of you. And it did for me, and it did for something traumatic that I dealt with for 10 years that I had no explanation of, but I don't think we really have time to go into that, because that is a whole thing and not something I really talk about. But some heavy stuff that I dealt with for a long period of time that there's no explanation of. And maybe it could be the result of my fascination with all of this stuff on a subconscious level. I don't know. But the book is incredibly good. But the abduction phenomena doesn't vary. And all these people accounts who have been abducted, the stories are very, very similar. They will vary, obviously, because sometimes it is different species that are doing it, and they're doing it for different reasons. And so a lot of the backstory with this has to do with, I think, like I mentioned earlier, Project Sign, or not Project Sign, the Sigma Treaty, which I believe Eisenhower signed with the Greys, as the story goes, where in exchange for technology, they could abduct our people and perform experiments, and we would give them asylum on our planet, and yada, yada, yada. And so people always describe them as the same way. Greys is the particular species we're talking about. 3 to 3.5 feet tall are the small ones, which are believed to be biological entities, essentially a biological robot, if you will, if we were to create a robot that was biological, not like a machine. And they're controlled by essentially the tall Greys, who are about 7 feet tall. There's usually one on them per ship, and then the rest of them are these little 3 feet tall Greys that basically are performing a lot of the medical procedures. And most of the procedures that are performed on the abductees are usually of a sexual or reproductive nature. They seem very fascinated with studying the reproductive systems of our species, which has led to the belief of a hybridization program. Throughout my research, it has been said that their species is dying off. They have interbred for so long. They've evolved. They've been around for millions of years, longer than we have. And if you think about the interbreeding of our species, a great episode of South Park, Goobacks from the Future. I don't know if you remember it. It's fucking amazing.
No.
Oh my god, amazing episode. I love South Park so much. But it's basically the interbreeding. It's basically us in the future, where every race has interbred so much that we've all just turned into one grayish color.
Especially adding technology to it. And it's a conversation I have with a friend that is from Virginia a lot, which is, if you look at right now births, they all need to be assisted, because women, and I'm not blaming them for this, but technology keeps growing. We're having births in the hospital. C-section amount is growing up crazy. Now there's getting a moment of evolution that we're going to need to do a C-section to bring the baby out. At some point, reproduction is going to be a challenge.
Yeah. It's essentially that idea that, that was what South Park was making fun of, was, us in, millions of years in the future, we'd all be one color, bald, a mix of all the races, this unisex type thing. And so,
which makes sense. They were also saying that in the next 100 years, there's going to be no colored eyes.
Yeah. So those type of things, which we can genetically kind of extrapolate probability of what things might look like. And so the story goes with these beings is that they have genetically interbred so much. And if you also think the level of power, so you think about the secret societies, or not even the secret societies, the families, the 75 families, whatever, they control over half the world's wealth. They're not mingling with common folk. They're not breeding with common folk. They're breeding within their circles of power and money. It's strategic. It's things like that. And so
or keeping it in the family.
Yep. And so you're interbreeding then the people who also hold all the power and all the wealth. Their genetic pool is very limited because they're not spreading it out. But so this race supposedly is their genes are essentially failing, and they're dying because they have interbred so much that there are deformities, there are mutations, there are things that are essentially killing them off. And so they are here essentially trying to create a hybridization program with us in order to keep their race alive and ultimately keep it alive on this planet, because they are not able to necessarily live here without, breathing similar oxygen levels that we are. Like, our bodies are adapted to this environment, theirs are not. And so that is what they're doing, is creating this hybridization program, and they're already among us. And there's a lot of within the UFO, stories of abduction where women are taken, essentially immaculate conception. They're pregnant without having sex with anybody. They're suddenly pregnant. They're abducted. They don't remember, much of what happens. And then suddenly they're with child. And then 5 months into that pregnancy, the child disappears from their stomach. They're taken again. The child is taken out. And there's a number of stories about this throughout, the past 50 years of things like this happening, which kind of, people give credence to it being a part of this, genetic hybrid program.
Medical would call it psychological pregnancy or stuff like that, which happens a lot, even with animals. For example, there's a lot of cases of psychological pregnancy, and they say their stomach grows, and they feel like there's somebody inside. There's a baby inside, and suddenly they're not pregnant anymore.
Well, there's been cases also that women think they're pregnant to a certain point that they start lactating.
Yeah. Well, the biology of what our bodies can do, same like a bunch of women living together, all get on the same menstrual cycle.
The mind can do.
Yeah, the mind can do exactly what the mind can do. But so the abduction phenomena is a very key part of the UFO phenomena, and is something that definitely cannot be left out because of how prevalent it has been. This is what the Stephen Greer, when he has a Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, they call it the C scale: Close Encounters of the first kind, second, third, fourth, and fifth kind. And so the scale essentially goes: Close Encounters of the first time is you witness a craft, you see a UFO flying. That is a close encounter of the first kind. Close encounter of the second kind is you witness the craft, and then you see a physical remnants left behind, whether an imprint in the grass, radiation on a tree, broken tree branches. There's physical evidence left behind that what you saw was in fact there. Close Encounters of the third kind is you see a craft, you see physical evidence, and you see a being coming outside of that craft. You see them outside of the vehicle itself and then going in. Close Encounters of the fourth kind is essentially abduction. You are abducted against your will by a different species, and they have taken you aboard their ship and are,
or tampered with generally, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially it's interaction against your will. Usually in the form of abduction. And then Close Encounters of the fifth kind is what Stephen Greer coined, which is essentially human-initiated contact with extraterrestrials, where you are going out to actively make contact with them, where the other four are passive. They're happening to you. You didn't initiate them. It was against your will. Close Encounters of the fifth kind is human-initiated contact with extraterrestrial beings. And that is what, me and my buddy Vera did.
Which we've done at Mount Adams.
Yeah, Mount Adams and Area 51. And I need to tell you, we were just at Catalina. Me and Monica went out there, and we camped she wanted to see some of the stuff with her own eyes. And Catalina is one of the biggest hot spots there is. I mean, there are bases all underneath the ocean there, and this has been validated and backed up by countless fucking people. Not just witnesses who've seen craft shoot out of the ocean and leave it, but the Tic Tac incident that took place, the declassified one from the DOD, took place 70 miles south of Catalina near Baja. And that was where the ship was that came out of the water, where they chased it. And there was another radar sighting that they had a part of that same incident where 100 craft came down from the stratosphere and were just hovering, going like 30 knots at 80,000 feet above Catalina. 100 of them all plop, 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 plop. And then they all dropped straight down to the ocean floor in half a second. Not possible from 80,000
Wild.
feet. And all backed by radar, all followed. This is like all part of the unidentified thing. And so Catalina is a massive fucking hotspot. So we went out there to camp, went on the backside.
When was this?
Last week. And went out there to do this. sadly, we drank too much that night and kind of passed out. But the night, I have to say, a bunch of very, very strange things happened. One of which was we were hiking before the day we got there. So we set up camp and then went on some crazy hikes, like up on the cliffs. And we were up atop of one, and all of a sudden we heard this sound that I can only kind of describe as if you ever watched like Star Wars, when a ship comes out of light speed and suddenly it appears, it goes, like when it like suddenly stops, like it's going from light speed and they all disappear, yeah. Like that, but with like an energetic pulse to it. And so the cloud seemed to only cover the whole west side of the island. The east side facing inland is completely clear, but that other side, which is where a lot of the bases are said to be underwater, and I'm going to tell you something about that in a second, is completely under cloud cover most of the time, which is very strange. So we're at the top of this thing, and we hear this sound, this loud, pulsating sound I have never heard in my entire life, an energetic vroom, vroom, going, and both her eyes, she's like, do you hear that? And I'm like, yeah. And we just sat, and it was the most eerie, insane fucking thing ever, and we're like, that's really weird. Go down to our campsite. We're staying at a place called Shark Harbor. There's only 3 campsites there. We got there. There's one group of people, a couple that was to the one to the right of us. We were in the middle. And then later that night, another couple came. They had a bunch of shit. And so a bunch of these things just got really weird. There was a lawn chair with an umbrella and a knee board and a towel that was on the beach. We thought it was just a bunch of people at that beach who were staying at the campsites on the other side of the hill. They all left, and that chair just sat there. Nobody fucking claimed it. So we thought, oh, maybe it's the people who were to the campsite to the next of us. Maybe they're just not using it, but it's just one chair. It was kind of weird. I get up, I set the alarm for 2 a.m. We went to bed at midnight. We're just too tired. We're like, all right, I'm gonna set the alarm for 2 a.m. We're gonna get up because 3 a.m. is when all this stuff happens. But we each pounded like 5 shots of vodka, and we don't really drink, so it was enough to do us in. But like, I set the alarm, I got up. I don't really remember anything other than I stumbled outside of the tent. I looked up and it was still cloudy, and I'm like, fuck, it's gonna be really hard. And I was like, I don't know. It all seemed like a blur, like as if I was like on the date rape drug, like somebody slipped me something. I crawl back in the tent. I don't really remember anything. And I just remember kind of coming out of consciousness. I see her laying halfway outside of the tent puking, and which she's Polish. They drink. She's never puked in her life. And she's like, it was all just like those flashes of memory, but like it all seemed really weird. We get up at 7 a.m. and the people who were to the right of us had all of their shit the night before, all over the camping table, like the picnic table, like everything was out, scattered everywhere. 7 a.m., nobody was there. Both those people were completely gone. Their campsites completely packed up. We didn't hear a fucking thing. And I didn't really sleep well that night either. It was like kind of hot and didn't feel well. Didn't hear anything. Completely gone. That same lawn chair with the knee board, with the umbrella still up all night. I mean, at least put the umbrella down if it was somebody so it didn't blow away or at the beach. Like, that was just still sitting there eerily. And everybody was gone. And no sign of them. I mean, no time they would have had to have left. Like, where would they have gone? There's only one shuttle because everything Corona was shut down. There's only one shuttle to get from Avalon over there, and it left at 1:30. That was the only way to get to that side of the island. It's 20 miles away. And they're all gone, and we're like, this is weird. And then we were waiting for the shuttle to come get us. And then the same thing. We heard the same, lasted like 60 seconds. Like just guttural vibration, like an energy.
You heard? Did you felt it too?
Felt it and heard it.
Yeah.
Very, very sure. There is like, when you talk about the weirdness of like Jumbo Rock, you talk about the weirdness of like the energies of these places. There is an energy at Catalina, man, especially on that west side, like the camping area, not near Avalon. There is an energy there. And we went on after that, and I was like, well, I'm bummed out. We'll go back, and we won't drink next time, and hopefully there won't be clouds. But I wanted to pull up Google Earth, and I was like, I'll tell you what, half of Antarctica is blocked out on Google Earth, which you may ask, why? It's a giant fucking block of ice. What would they possibly be blocking out in Antarctica where there is nothing but is blocked out? Obviously, because there's tons of bases there underneath the ice, civilizations. I believe that's where Atlantis really is. But I was like, it's blocked out. I was like, I guarantee you, we're going to zoom in on Google Earth. If you pull up the terrain map on Google Earth, I have screenshotted all of them. I can send them to you guys, but you can also just do it yourself. Zoom in, because on that they have full sonar imaging of the ocean. You can see the topography underneath the ocean. It's all there, clear as day on Google Earth. And
really?
The satellite.
Of the deepest oceans?
Yeah, well, around that area anyway. Like, you can see everything. And you zoom in, and there is about 10 spots that are blocked out, black boxes, underneath the ocean, blocked out.
I thought we never reached the bottom of our oceans.
We haven't. Yeah. But Catalina, I mean, we're on the plate here.
Right.
San Andreas Fault. Like, it's, in Catalina is it's not a volcanic thing. It's a structure of two plates converging and pushing up out of the
Got
ocean.
it.
And so it's not it's a shelf that's there, but you can zoom in and see all the topography around it. And you zoom in and you'll see these black boxes and like 10 different areas. And I screenshotted all of them along with the Latin long of exactly where they are, the degrees and everything. And that area is a restricted airspace. You can't go there. It's people aren't floating around there. Like it's completely like blocked off. And like I said, people see lasers shooting out from the ocean there, seeing green beams come out. There's people seeing craft shooting in and out of them, spaceships that come in and out, and just like the Tic Tac thing that happened out there. There are countless of these hotspots like around the world. If you're in a war zone, look up, you'll see it because they're always around during that. If you're around a nuclear facility, look up, they're always around those areas. They're always around everywhere. They're around during the day too.
What are the I know this is a never-ending topic, but what are the 5 hotspots in the world right now?
Well, I mean,
or fuck it, just because it's you. What are the top? What are the 10?
There's so many. I mean, Mount Adams is a great one. You'll always see stuff going up there. Mount Shasta is a major vortex. Mount Shasta is a base, just like Mount Adams. Major stuff goes on at Shasta. Major stuff goes on at Mount Adams. The NTS, the Nevada test sites, which is where Groom Lake, Area 51, S4, China Lake, all that stuff is out there. That area, 100%, you'll see stuff. Joshua Tree is another popular one. I haven't made contact out there myself, but Joshua Tree and that surrounding area is another one. Coastal, Catalina, obviously. South Baja, Mexico. There's an island, Guadalupe, off of Little Guadalupe Island, I think is what it's called. It's about it's a 20-hour boat ride off the coast of Baja, Mexico, and that area. I mean, the interviews of the fishermen, the people there, and the pilots there who've watched craft like massive ships. Like a lot of these times, we're not just talking. When we talk about some of these mass sightings, we're not talking about saucers. We're talking about motherships. Talk about the Phoenix Lights. Things are 2 miles wide. We're talking things that look like aircraft carriers in the sky. Like tons of these.
Bigger.
Tons of these sightings are like massive ships. It's not like somebody's looking up and being like, oh yeah, maybe it's just a cloud that I misinterpreted, or like it's the North Star. These are ships that are like 1,000 feet in the air that are the size of aircraft carriers that are like miles long. Like a number of these sightings, they're not something that you would accidentally interpret as being something else. Like it's clear what they are, and the accounts of the people who have seen these are identical, detailed, spread throughout. Like sometimes a 50-mile radius where the ship cruised through, and everybody saw it. And like in the reports go throughout all of these counties of people, from police officers to everybody who witnessed this, and like talk on radios like, "I see it, here it is." This happens so often. Like so often. And once again, it's just all you have to do is look. And that's my message to anybody out there listening to this. And I mean, because I could talk about this for another 5 fucking hours, and rest assured that still probably wouldn't be enough. And we've really scratched, the surface with a number of these topics, because they could be dove into at such great detail even more. But I strongly encourage you. You've got the list of the shows. I said the shows at the beginning of the documentaries that I think are more credible, that have really good footage and are backed by a lot of expert testimony, especially Stephen Greer. He was the one that put together the CSETI program in 2001, had 200 people that he put together, expert witnesses from every branch of the military, politics, all around the world, who had worked on UFO crash retrieval teams, you name it, these people, and they came and spoke. It was live on C-SPAN, the most watched fucking thing ever on C-SPAN, and talked to Congress and said, it was essentially the disclosure movement. And 2 weeks later, 9/11 happened. And around that same time was also when Donald Rumsfeld admitted that we had $3.7 trillion that we couldn't account for, which obviously all goes into these black budget programs. And then 9/11. Because this bombshell was dropped right around the same time.
And the Pentagon, where all the
financial
money,
stuff.
Financial.
And there's no plane, no wreckage, no anything.
Plane, yeah.
Missile, 100%. But that type of stuff. And so, some documentaries, some books for you to check out. I think Communion is a great one. The one that I was just saying, if you're wanting, some hard stuff, the UFOs, generals, pilots, and government officials go on the record by Leslie Kean. You have the whole Secret Machines series by Tom DeLong and his co-authors, 3 that are nonfiction, 3 that are fiction. They're the last of each of them have not come out. There's 2 books released so far in each series. The God's Man in War is the nonfiction, and then Secret Machines, Chasing Shadows, and I can't remember the second one's called. Are incredibly good. Sands of Time is the Sean David Morton trilogy. Should be 4, but sadly he's in jail now. So, and that was one of the authors I tracked down and interviewed and talked at great length because I wanted to see if he was full of shit about all this stuff. Those are really hard to get a hold of. I don't think you can get a hold of them anymore.
You'll create a list for us, right?
Yeah, I need to put it in the in
the description
of YouTube or something like that where people can see it and go through it.
Yeah, and a lot of those the things I mentioned earlier, all the various, Project Blue Book, Project Grudge, Camden Report, Colorado Report, all those things. Some of the the most notorious UFO sightings. Dive into those. I'm telling you, if you look at them,
if you search, you'll find it. There's no reason.
Yeah, there's no way your logical brain is going to look at them and be like, nah. Like, it's indisputable evidence.
Yeah,
it's indisputable.
I think the basis is just people just kind of hear it, they ignore it. It's not a big deal, but they don't go further than that. But what you're
doesn't
suggesting,
change their regular life.
No.
Right.
Which is fine. And that's a lot of people I encounter. That's some of my best friends. They tell me they're just like, I just don't care. Like, I just want to live my life. And which is 100% fine. Like, I know I'm more of an anomaly about this. This is a fascination of mine because I personally think it's one of the most important things there is because it impacts every aspect of our life. The origin of us, what we believe to be true and where we're going in our place in the universe. And to me, I think those, and where we go when we die. I think those are the most important questions we can ask that dictate how you live your life and the quality of life that you have and the happiness that you have within that life. But other people, like, it's ignorance can be bliss, like, to a degree. It can be. And so I understand that. And I understand people who hold religious views, and I completely support that because it's ultimately, we're all looking for purpose.
Yeah.
We're all looking for purpose. We're all looking for answers, and everyone's going to find them in different places.
Actually, when you said this earlier, the only thing I wanted to add to that was I don't have a problem with people's beliefs. Mm-hmm. That I'm totally fine with that.
Neither.
But I do have a problem with people that don't believe in anything.
Yeah.
Those are the people that I'm
Which
more
is a
concerned
religion
about.
in and of itself. Like, atheism and the belief in nothing is a religion.
Right.
That is what you're putting your faith in.
Yeah.
Like, that's what the irony is thick. Like, that is a belief structure. That is a way of running your life. And it's hilarious that people are like, oh, I'm an atheist. And I well, then you believe that there's
still believe
nothing.
in something.
Yeah, you believe that there's nothing. Like, that is your paradigm of existence. And that is a belief in and of itself. I just challenge people like with this because I believe, to me personally, it is the most interesting thing there is. It's changed my life in more ways than I can possibly comprehend. In later, podcasts when we dive into psychedelics and when we, dive further into government cover-ups and things like that, you'll understand a better picture of how it's impacted my life. But it's systemic in the sense that you should be questioning everything all the time. Don't accept what people tell you, because people, by and large, don't know what they're talking about. And by and large, the people who claim to know what they're talking about are lying to you deliberately.
There's an agenda.
There's an agenda. And I don't have an agenda. Like, this is just my own fascination with this. And I'm only saying it because I'm passionate about it and it excites me. And I think it's important. And so I talk about it to whoever wants to listen.
And everybody that heard the last episode and this episode, we thank you. And we appreciate this. And there's going to be more coming. Please remind people where they can find you.
Instagram primarily, Nate, A, middle initial, then Scholz, SCHOLZ. This podcast is brought to you by Chintuka Birthday.
Of course.
Hell yeah, that's the new movie.
Tell people what is Chintuka Birthday.
I did a movie a couple years ago in India, which I'm very proud of and turned out incredibly well.
We're very proud of.
Thank you. Which is international. I mean, it's released in 190 countries, but it's sadly not in the U.S. But yet. It is but it's on a streaming platform that's in 190 countries. And so the movie has done insanely well. It is the 5th most liked movie in India history for a streaming movie. It's won tons of awards. I've won some awards for it. And the reaction, the feedback, the reviews, the IMDb rating, everything on it is better than I ever could have hoped. And we're all incredibly grateful. And the message of the movie is phenomenal. And so If you are savvy with tech, you can torrent it, or you can get a VPN and sign up for Z5 Premium and pretend like you live in Canada or something, and you'll be able to stream it that way. Or if you're somebody I know, you can message me and I'll shoot you a little private link. But I better fucking know you.
That's
Exactly.
right. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
The movie was great. We enjoyed it. This podcast was amazing. And until
Thanks,
next
man.
time.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you having me.
Bye night.
Bye.
And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ride Boundless podcast. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe. More importantly, share. If you know anybody that's in the motorcycle or car industry or is a fanatic or whatever the case is, let them know about this podcast. Sharing is caring. If you've already subscribed, thank you. If you haven't, make sure to do it. Until next week, ride safe, ride hard, ride boundless.